Hi, everybody. All right. Okay, I think that everything is nicely set up. The other YouTube window is muted. Eugene is in the house, and so that's a wonderful thing. Thank you for walking, sweetheart. I appreciate that so much, Genio.
I thank Sweetheart for walking me.
She's an amazing girl. Another rescue, and boy, but she's just so loving. Incredible girl. Okay, we're just waiting for Aragorn and Sandra to join us in the show. And we're going to talk a little bit about the show yesterday, which was truly amazing. And again, that was all Eugene and Raji's feeling to come up with that show. That was truly amazing. Let's just quickly pop over to the chat room, say hi to everybody. First up, I see is Penny. Much love to you too, Penny. We love you so much. Aragorn is coming in. Sandra said she might be a few minutes late. So Aragorn's coming in. Laura Gal, hi Laura Gal. Jeremy, Regina, Susan, Deb Ward. Yesterday was magical. That's right, Deb. Hi, Aragorn. And you know, just so everyone knows, we were saying yesterday it was kind of because the gematria was so huge on it was Magnificent Seven, but we're so fortunate because really we're the Magnificent Nine, and the only two pieces of the puzzle that would have made it perfect and divine, perfectly divine yesterday was if Aragorn and Sandra were there. And Aragorn was in the chat doing an amazing job. Thank you so much. And one of these days, that's what we want to do. We want to put together one of these shows with Aragorn and Sandra as well, and then that's the whole of the Freak Online family. Hello, Owie. Love you, sweetheart. So Colleen and Sinead are out today doing stuff with the lawyer, getting ready to take the Canadian Embassy by force. They're holed up in there pretty good, though. Pieces of dung. The world is just littered with pieces of dung. We got to clean the swamp, got to drain the swamp. I was watching Aragorn. I was watching last night, going over and just making more detailed notes. But again, the movie Oh God with George Burns and John Denver, and it's like every single time that they can use a name or they use a number, it's all massively encoded, and it's not just encoded for that this is divine and that this is God and this is truly the message of God, but it was just so much was Q, so much was Trump, so much was 55, so much was 35, so much was JFK, President 35. It was just everywhere. And you know, when you open your eye, when you open this eye, because you have two eyes through which you can look and be a participant in the world, but there's one eye that allows you to see. And when that eye comes open, then you begin to see the totality of what is, and what that is staggering. And that's going to really help us on the show today. And that's why I thought we could talk a little bit just before Sandra gets here. And that's because on the show today, holy cannoli, Tolkien takes this to another level, because you see, this is entirely maritime admiralty law system. It's entirely 7 heavenly layers of energy versus the 7 hellish energies that are below us. And so Bilbo rises above the elves, and the elves are stooping to the level of the dwarves, and the dwarves have huddled themselves underneath the ground. So then it's Bilbo that has to take charge of everything. Because Bilbo Baggins is 99, which is most high. And then it's barrels out of bond. And the bond, the surety are the handcuffs around each and every one of us when we're born. I mean, this stuff is amazing when this turns on. So I'm going to throw that over to Aragorn. Welcome to the show. And Genio, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, I've only seen Oh God once, and yeah, it was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. I wasn't in a analytical mind. I wasn't decoding it as such. I just enjoyed it. I think the second time I watch it, more will come out. But yeah, I find it a bit easier to decode perhaps some of the more serious kind of stuff. Like I'm watching Sherlock again at the moment, and that just screams. There's so much in there. The more light-hearted stuff, I find it relaxes me. So I'm not in work mode with that. But yeah, this whole chapter, like you say, is admiralty, so-called law, fake law. It's fear, it's suspicion. You know, the necromancer's spell over Mirkwood has even affected the elves. That they're not immune to sorcery, which means that, you know, the higher we rise, even when we become elves, we can't be complacent. We still have to protect ourselves and do the work, and you know, keep our energy high. Otherwise, those spells will begin to affect our consciousness, and we'll become suspicious and fall to fear, and you know, we won't be able to see goodness when it's in front of our face. So yeah, great chapter. Every single chapter is great, but it's like they build up towards the end. Yeah. Hey Eugene, how's it going, dude?
Fantastic. I'm just glad we're doing these shows again, because yeah, I always look forward to them. But like, I feel like yeah, when it comes to just talking about stories, it just brings in another avenue to look at things. You know what I mean? It's like another perspective, and I like that.
Yeah, it opens it up, doesn't it? It becomes mythical. And one massive realization for me over the last few years is that mythology is real. It's not something just confined to the realms of stories. It affects us all, and our lives become mythological the more we awaken, and the more this switches on. Our inner oracle helps us become that hero, which is what Bilbo's doing as he's coming up these chakras, and they're still in the heart because they're still in Mirkwood. But he's no longer, this quest isn't a personal quest anymore. It's become, you know, they're being confronted, even though the necromancers only mentioned in passing. We've only seen the lower levels of evil so far in the story, like goblins, wolves, which represent our lower sort of personal demons. Whereas now in the story, we're being confronted with the necromancer and the evil that has plagued the hearts. So the quest has become something more than just a quest for treasure, even though the dwarves and Bilbo don't know it, and Bilbo probably never knows it until he meets Frodo in Rivendell. But this quest has become something more. This is to retake Middle Earth, and it has to start with the dragon first, but then it becomes, you know, Sauron and the true enemy.
Yeah, and just like what you were saying, mythos is life, right? Mythology, it's like our psychology and movement and action, and you know, there's a reason why we're supposed to be mystics. And yeah, you pointed to the eye, and mysticism is all about fire, right? So it's all about the baptism of fire. So yeah, I mean, mythos is everything. The mythology, man.
Yeah, and especially in the time we find ourselves, and it's never been more obvious that this is mythological. This is, you know, I guess the further we fall into something like the Kali Yuga and consciousness is at its lowest ebb, we don't see that magic. We don't see the mythos. But as we start to rise out of it, then it becomes clear. You know, and I just feel so blessed that, well, for one, that I'm here with you guys that see it too, but also just through no engineering of my own, I woke up to it, and thank God, because me and my friend Scott were talking about this last night, actually. Can you imagine being here and now, being completely ignorant of what's actually going on at the deepest level or the deeper levels, and this all just hitting you like a flood? I can't. I'm glad I've been prepared to some degree for this.
Yeah, that would be tough.
Yeah, that's where the compassion has to come in for, the people that are still wearing masks. Not so many in the UK now, where I am anyway. Sadly, hardly any really. But there's still a lot that are afraid, and I would say the majority is still enthralled by the establishment and the need for material security and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be tough.
But you've earned it, and again, everyone who's here has earned it. We've all bumped into those that have come before us, and we're forever grateful for that. But again, there's a only so far anyone can take you, and then you have to jump into this full force, and that's what Eugene has done. That's what Justin has done. Aaron has done. And that's what Aragorn and Sandra have done. They've jumped 100% into this. And in many regards, it's entirely their life. Like for Aragorn now, knowing what he knows, it's the entirety of his relationships and how he interacts with everyone. It's his business, which is for now, this interaction with others to generate this currency that is currently necessary until such time that we go back to gold and silver. But everything that Aragorn has done is to envelop his entire life around this truth and this story and what's going on. So therefore, this is on with Aragorn, and Aaron sees the wholeness of what's happening. So therefore he has the wisdom to know barrels out of bond is maritime admiralty law. But bigger than that, just like Aragorn was saying, he has the wisdom to know that this building towards the dragon and this building towards the battle of the five armies is what's happening right now. I mean, it's just incredible to think that The Hobbit is playing, and we chose to do The Hobbit first. We chose to do the show. We chose, the five of us chose to come together. We chose to do The Hobbit first, and now, and there was no deep thought in that at all. There was no deep thought. It was a feeling. It was something that sort of came to us, and everyone felt really comfortable with this. And now the timeline literally appears that our timeline of completing The Hobbit is literally this timeline towards Passover, where the rising of man comes again. Not Ishtar. There's no such thing as Ishtar. It's complete bullshit. There's no such thing as Ishtar. Easter is Queen Ishtar, which is Semiramis. And this is the Babylon whore, the goddess of fornication. And this is the spouse to either Nimrod for Ishtar or Baal for Semiramis. And so this is the upside down satanic unholy trinity that the Cabal have just perverted. They've just taken the one story, turned it upside down, and created their story. And then that's how they create the Star of David. And as such, the Star of David is usually within the truth community is massively hated by most truthers. It's just pure evil. And of course it isn't. There's nothing of that is God and God's creation that is evil. It's beautiful. The Star of David is beautiful. But for it to be a real Star of David, there needs to be a diamond in the middle, because again, if we quickly look at this, I'll just make a quick Star of David here, and we can just quickly explain this. And that's why we always tell you, be careful who you follow, because whether they mean to or not, people who don't know the whole truth are leading you down these roads, the cul-de-sacs, and they go nowhere in the end. So we'll get to the other diagram, this other part of this in just a sec, but just for now. So the Star of David is the phallic of the Father, which is blue shift, okay, which is the higher mind. and which is the singularity, because it always rises to a single dot, a single point, which is solitary or monadic, sun or moon. There's a oneness to it all, because the sun is magnetic and so is the moon, because they're eternal. So that's that single point that rises to singularity, and then this is the duality. So you see this? Upon high is the singularity, upon high is the duality, and this is redshift, and this is below, and this is blue is within and the red is without, and the blue is above and the red is below. And so together they create the hips of the vagina of the feminine, the sacred feminine, and there is the phallic of the father. And so you have phallic and vagina, penis and vagina, and which is therefore that so again, if you want to know the truth, you got to switch on. This is creation. So the Star of David is absolutely purely beautiful because it's all about creation. And so if it's all about creation, then the one thing that's missing in this middle portion is simply this, which is the light of the world. And that's the Star of David. And if you want to create a proper Star of David, then you show the baby in the womb. This is the womb. See, this is the womb. They create the womb. The father and the mother create the womb. So when we go to her, we get her and we rise to her. We have V for victory, and then W, and we've won. Double B, double V, double V is a W. Two V's is a W. And the two V's create, if you take two V's together, they automatically create the phallic of the father. See? And that's how you create a W, is the phallic of the father within the vagina of the mother, because everything is creation in all moments. And how do you know that? Because God is stillness and silence, stationary. That's why the earth is stationary, never move, never will move. The Bible talks about that hundreds of times, that the earth does not move and will never move. It is a stationary, solid reality. It's the octave. It is the one place that is physical, literally physical, where everything matters and everything else is metaphysical and nothing matters. This is where we need to get to. But so that's the trinity and the higher message to all of this. And so it's always the sexual encounter, because the mother is magnetism, and magnetism is in Sanskrit, mag means motion, constant motion. She never turns off. She's always on, and God is always still. And when you have movement against stillness, you create friction. This is the friction. The diamond is the friction. So when it's born, it's a diamond in the rough, because we're electrical and we fall. That's why we fall down this birthing canal that they've turned into a shipyard and a dock, where the doctor takes the gold, OR, which is you, and puts it into a cargo manifest. And that's what your birthing certificate is a cargo manifest. They own you. In their mind, they own you. And that's what your birthing certificates are cargo manifests, so that when you arrive into this fake reality of their world, then you are matter. And that's why they call you a fetus, because we're here to feed them. Feed us. Fetus is feed us. And we do unwittingly through our intellectual property and our sweat equity. And then if that wasn't enough, then they tax us. So they take all of our ideas and they develop them with their money, which is our money, because they stole that money from us. So we come up with all the ideas, and then we build it all, and they get credit for it because they stole our money, and that's how all of this works. So in the center of creation is electricity. Electricity, look in any manual or even an encyclopedia, Wikipedia, about electricity. What does it say? Caused by friction. Electricity is caused by friction. That's what taught to you that one night on that amazing show about the toroidal field reality of God's creation and the torus field, is that, remember, just electricity alone, not even talking magnetism, just electricity alone. There's infinite energy, infinite free energy in the atmosphere from this static charge that is constantly being created above us, because it's a constant downward causation of electricity, which creates a static charge in the sky, which is where ultimately where clouds come from. It is entirely where thunder and lightning originate from. And this static charge and discharge is this matter antimatter. That's, this is where Star Trek and Roddenberry came up with this matter antimatter, is nothing more than static charge and discharge, and the twain shall never meet, for if they do, the whole world will blow up. Or you just go to singularity, but whatever. So that's our reality. And so sex occurs, that's the Star of David, is all about creation. And there we are, the diamond in the rough. And that's changing the pineal gland into a diamond when you activate it by going up and to the right, casting thy net to the right. And again, so this is entirely free energy. So the Star of David is also showing you free energy. If you knew how to read, but you don't, because you went to Rockefeller School of English, and so we're all illiterate to God and God's language, but we know lots to be able to get a job and fill out a form, a cargo manifesto for the Rockefellers. Wow, that's great. But we don't know how to read God. And this is reading God. And so the Star of David, which is the king of men, foreshadowing the arrival of Christ, is free energy. That's free energy. And you see how the diamond is always associated with free energy? It has to, because it's father, mother, child. And so child is created by the constant sex that is occurring between father and mother, which is electricity and magnetism doing their dance, their interaction. And magnetism, the mother is constantly curvaceously moving. She never ceases. And the father is still and stationary. And the accompanying friction that occurs in that play, it's a dance. This is the dance. That's why there's so many songs in rock and roll about the dance and dancing. That's that dance. And the result is the child. And that's creation. So the Star of David is absolutely beautiful. So let me pass that back over to the boys if they want to jump in with any of that.
Do you want to say something, Aaron? Yeah, and it's super interesting how it becomes a diamond this way too, right? Like you just take it down a notch and you take it up a notch. So it's hilarious. And so I guess, yeah, that diamond merging becomes the Merkaba and the seed of the soul kind of a thing. And yeah, there's a little banging. So if I stop talking, it's them doing work. And it's just interesting. I wanted to comment on my face you drew again. Because it's very interesting how this is the whole Israel thing, because in the word dwarf there's Ra, there's red, and in the word there's blue, and there's Eve too, elf, right? It's very interesting. And so would that make man is, or the point of origin, so it's Israel kind of a thing, the middle way. It's just interesting how, Tolkien, whether or not he probably did it consciously, but even if he did it subconsciously, it all matches.
Yeah, and just look at the word dwarves. Again, it's dwarves. And so it's D is the fourfold nature of man, physicality. And then the first word you have is war. War at what? With the V, which is the victory, which is the mother. And so we don't want to be at war with her, but we are. And that's, by the way, what the dwarves do, and that's how they awoken the Balrog, because greedily, they delve deeper and deeper and deeper into her. Why? Out of love, out of respect, or out of greed for true silver. And that, of course, is Bilbo's jacket that we're going to come up to very quickly here. That then is gifted to Frodo, that saves Frodo from the the fight in Moria. So, but you do have Ra, but it's backwards. And that's the whole sort of problem with the dwarves, is that they're upside down. They're backwards. It doesn't make them evil at all. It gives them enormous potential for growth, but only if they pair themselves with that higher mind. So for Legolas, he needed Gimli, and Gimli needed Legolas. And then together, there was no stopping them. So much so that at the very, very sort of end, one of the last things that Tolkien writes, and this is in the appendices, but one of the last things that Tolkien writes about this story of the Fellowship of the Ring is that when Aragorn laid down his life as the king of Numenor, then Legolas built a ship in Ithilien, and he sailed to the Undying Lands. And how Tolkien writes it, and it is said in the Red Book that his great friend Gimli went with him and was admitted into the Undying Lands as the last of the Fellowship. And it's just, oh, crotchety old professor at Oxford. I mean, it's genius, and the man had a heart the size of the Grand Canyon. It's so beautiful that Gimli would be admitted into the Undying Lands along with Legolas, because they became two halves of one heart. Two halves of one heart. And they met in the middle. And this is 2 to 6, and they met 4, which is 4 of 7. So this is the 6th chakra, which is the third eye chakra. This is the 2nd chakra, which is the sacral chakra, the sacral plexus chakra. And they met in the middle, which is 4 of 7, which is the mother, which is the middle, which is magnetism, which is motion, movement, and that is the heart chakra, which is green upon the middle. That's 4 of 7, the middle way. And how does Gimli rise in The Lord of the Rings? By going to her entirely. Gimli is ready to lay down his life 100 times over for the honor of Galadriel. She's an elf. Gimli used to hate elves, and he would go to battle for anyone and anything if anyone said a word negatively against Galadriel, who's the elven queen. And when he got her, then he got him, and then they were united. But in that middle place, Galadriel is that heart chakra. He's that 4 of 7. And that's what it took for Gimli to rise and Legolas to meet him. And then together they were unstoppable. They're unstoppable because that's 2 and that's 6, and 2 and 6, 26 is God. Just saying. 26 is God, 26 is the alphabet, A to Z, and 2 plus 6 is, yep, you got it, here it comes, the double sine wave. Woo. And that is the eternal 8, and that's eternity. So where did Legolas and Gimli both end up? In the Undying Lands. I'm not making this stuff up. They both ended there. And you see with Tolkien, how it all relates in the story. It's all a story, but the story all relates to the chakras. It does, just saying.
You've even got that, sorry, Charlie, you've even got that scene in Peter Jackson's The Two Towers where Legolas says, "I'll get you something to stand on," because Gimli is literally raising himself up. Legolas is, helping him lift himself. I just wanted to say quickly about Star of David and the diamond, and all these misconceptions that people have when they're in suspicion of everything, like the diamond that's created in the middle, which is the Dia Mond, which is Di, 2, or stillness, and Mond, worlds, so 2 worlds unified. Then you've got Solomon, which is the sun and the moon, again, unified. You've got holistic consciousness, not separated. And the word Zionism is so demonized now, when Zion really it's sacred. It's the inner holy space within us that we achieve when we we've completed the work. You know, you've got Z, which is the raised Kundalini energy that goes all the way to the pineal gland after we've raised up Jacob's ladder. You've got Io, which is I and zero, which is the balanced masculine and feminine energy. Again, holistic consciousness, the switched on illuminated pineal gland, balanced within the whole, so the monadic point. And then you've got the N, so Zion, and N is the journey of the sacred secretions. It's the 14th letter, it's seed, it's nun, it's the fish, it's Christ, raised all the way up here. So when you've done the work, you are in Zion. Just like in the Matrix, where, you know, the human whole world, home in reality, outside of the Matrix is Zion. That's why they called it that. So yeah, nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be. People get so caught up in the darkness, they can't see that everything is originally God, and it's only bastardized forms.
That's why God always opens with "Do not be afraid."
That's so true. And hey, remember everyone, this is the world that Colleen and I walked into 4.5 years ago when we started. And we started with Mike Williams and Mark Devlin, two wonderful guys who were heaping loads and loads of truth out there, but they were being weighted down by everyone else in the community, especially those famous ones who are above them, you know, in fame and fortune and legend. And so the message was that it's just pure evil. So when we came into it, we're like, that's why Mark Devlin took a flyer on us. And we did the show about rock and roll the rock music, because he was intrigued by it. And you have to just give Mark enormous credit for going with that feeling when he had already written one book and was in the midst of writing a second book, which is Musical Truth Volumes 1 and 2, which are great books about, wow, there you go. That's volume 1. And Mark is in the midst of writing actually Music Truth Volume 3. And the proof is in the pudding, because what Mark wants to do in Musical Truth Volume 3 is focus the second half of the book entirely upon this divinity found in the music, hidden away and kept alive by these roll the rock bands. And so, you know, he wanted to lay credit at our doorstep, and we just said, no, you don't need to. It's a journey for you to discover this and for you to write about this in one of your books as a completion of those two incredible books. And you know, I mean, it's all the dark stuff, because that's what they turned it into. But that's not how it started. And Mark awoke to the fact that that isn't how it started, that there were Buddy Hollys, that there were Elvis Presleys, and that these people put God first in their lives and in their songs, and that they were demonized, terrorized by the music industry, which is satanic, to obey them. And then Elvis had to go, and Buddy Holly died in a mysterious plane crash. Do your own research over Buddy Holly's plane crash. Look at the wreckage on the fields of Iowa. Looks like somebody scattered some metal on the ground and took some pictures of it. So, but that's what happens. And so you have all of these bands that were encoding this, essentially the Star of David, in all of their songs. Eric Wolfson, Alan Parsons, the Alan Parsons. Every single album, every single song is a dedication to Zion, to getting to Zion. So yeah, so that's what it's all about. And so a lot of credit goes to Mark Devlin for having the courage to do that, Mike Williams as well. And so that's where Colleen and I started 4.5 years ago. Everyone going, you two are nuts. You're absolutely crazy. But like we like the fact that you say everything's a lie. Not everything is a lie though, but that's pretty good, because they lie about most things. No, they lie about everything. No, the earth is round and it's spinning. And we're supposed to eat cows. So come on, give your head a shake. But you know, you got a lot of good stuff. You guys got some good stuff, but you're just too far out there. And then it's incredible because over 4.5 years, that's what everybody slowly has done. And they've gone, oh shit, oh shit. Yeah, they were telling the truth. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. So that's what we were sort of up against in the beginning. What Aragorn was just saying is that the truth community is just fear, is a fear-based community, and therefore everything is evil. And there you go. There you go. Mainstream media, truth community, all propped up by the institution to protect the institution. So it is what it is. But again, Zion is a, so Aaron gave you a beautiful explanation of what Zion is. And remember, Z is the end of the alphabet, is 26, which is God. So this is God's symbol, which is an N on its side. So therefore it's never ending. It's no longer ending. You're not rising and falling, rising, because that's no longer, that wouldn't apply because there's no more duality when you complete the journey. There's singularity. There's no more duality. So the N is now on its side and it becomes a Z. See, that's an N because there's no more rising and falling. There is the father, there is the mother, and the child who's gone up and to the right, up and to the right, up and to the right. And then you try and knock over, if you build a Z, try and knock over a Z. It is an incredibly stable, it's like the X, it's an incredibly stable structure because it is home. It is home. Where, for those who are alive in the Matrix, where did they live? Zion, Z-I-on. And then this is the God, I, on. What's Z? 26. What's God in Gematria? 26. God, I, on. And that's Zion. And that's why the demons created their entire movement, this Zionist movement, because it's their evil plan. Cain, it's all Cain and Abel. This is Cain's plan. And when God became aware of Cain's plan, let me just quickly reiterate very quickly here. Remember, what was Cain's plan? After killing and eating Abel, that wasn't the end. That was only the beginning. His plan was then to murder Adam, 10, 1. Adam is the one, Neo. He meant to murder Adam and then turn Eve into his whore. And he was going to seed Eve, his mother. Oedipus Rex, the Oedipus complex, is a Canaanite construction. And this is Cain wanting to turn Eve into a baby factory of his satanic seed. His outward ejaculation of his satanic seed. That's sick. And that's who the Canaanites are. That's why it's biblical, and that's why this has been around forever, because this is Cain versus Abel. And we are Abel, and they are absolutely not able. And so this is why they pervert the truth, and now everyone thinks that Zionism is bad and purely evil. And look at everyone today. And again, rightly so, based on what's happened. But everyone thinks Freemasonry is purely, completely evil. No, Freemasonry is perfect and beautiful. It grew out of the Knights Templar, which grew out of the Gnostics, which grew out of the Essenes, which grew out of the Atlanteans. They perverted it. They took it over and perverted it. And they took the one aspect that they liked about it, which was secrecy, and then they used it as an army. And the principle in this new Freemasonry is never look back, only look forward, which is the armed forces motto. In the military, the armed forces are never taught and never allowed to turn around and look back, because if they did, they see everybody fleeing for their lives. If they did that, then there'd be nobody left to fight. So that's why the Rockefeller Rothschild motto of never look behind you is an infantryman's motto or slogan, is never look behind you.
Also, you'd see the general on the hill that's ordering you into the massacre, and he's sat there safe. So yeah. Don't look behind.
Yeah, having a Chianti and some fava beans. Hannibal Lecter.
Probably a gun to their back so they don't turn around, right? That whole
Absolutely. Just look at the Kubrick film with Kirk Douglas, and that is the Dreyfus affair in France. And what was it? Glory. Oh, what was it? Open Glory, or anyways, Kubrick's amazing with Kirk Douglas, and that is the Dreyfus affair in France, and so basically it was a hopeless situation, and it should never have been ordered to occur. And so what the commanding officer was ordering the remaining troops in the trenches to do was that as they met this resistance they were outnumbered, and they were from below trying to go up a hill. So, and then the opposition forces had mastery of weaponry as well. So they had everything, and they were down on the valley floor trying to go up the mountain. And so it was hopeless, and they began to turn around. So the commanding officer ordered fire, the French troops in the trench to order fire on the French troops trying to return to the trenches. And he was promoted, and anyone who tried to come back was essentially executed. They were all killed, but they created a group of five to use as examples before the rest of the world and the rest of the troops, to show that you follow effing orders or else. And so that's the insanity of it. It's one of the best movies ever made, ever done. Painful to watch, but it really happened. And again, that movie was never released in France as a movie. It eventually came out in France as, I think, VHS, maybe when DVD was released. I can't remember. It eventually came around. So that movie that Kubrick did was never allowed to be in France. But there's no conspiracy going on in the world. No, not at all. Nope.
Yeah, that's how much the Canaanites don't want you to know who they are, huh? And yeah, because vampires like to hide. But yeah, so to continue with Zion, Z becomes 26, 2 + 6 is 8. And 8 is really, death and regeneration. So it's a whole rebirth thing, or theta, theo on the cross, in Greek is the 8th letter of the Greek alphabet. So really Zion is behind the veil. It's behind evil. It's behind the illusion. It's behind delusion. It's behind duality. And it's interesting how Z looks like like Harry Potter's strike, lightning strike, because it's all about the pulse and electricity. That's why it looks so much like the S, but I think S has to do more with the transverse wave. And I think Z has to do with that instant longitudinal, scalar standing. So, and I also want to say that to get to Zion, it seems Abel is the only answer, which is to raise your electricity. Whereas if you shoot out your electricity, your life force, you become Cain. So yeah, it was just very interesting that you bring up Cain and Abel, because that's exactly it. And the ejaculatory world is the thought, the out of place thought world that we've created, and everyone's worshiping this idol, this golden bull of whatever it is, consume, don't create. Whereas I think people who are able, or the line of Seth, are creators and want to credit, not create debt. So yeah.
That's absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely the truth. And the reason is that, I said that because everything reduces down to Cain versus Abel, because Cain versus Abel is left brain versus right brain. And that's it. That's what this has all been about. The Bible, the two bulls, the lower bull and the higher bull, the red bull and the blue bull, the Old Testament and the New Testament, supposed to be 66 books, 33 below, 33 above. And that is the journey of man to create 6. And it's also the rising of Christ. And that's the second 33. That's why the New Testament is the book of Christ, because it's his rising in 33 levels to get to here, where everything has to be cast to the right and to go back into the hypoglossal opening in the brainstem. And it's the only way. And it doesn't get taught in school. It's incredible. And then at that hypoglossal opening in the brainstem, just above it is an olive, just below it is a pyramid. I'm not making this up. You go to Gray's Anatomy, you go to any of the medical encyclopedias, and they will literally show you these microscopic images of that hypoglossal opening. And you zoom in and you see that there is an olive shape above the hypoglossal, and there is a pyramid below. And where is the Mount of Olives located? In Israel. And where are the pyramids located? In Egypt. Israel is Abel. Egypt is Cain. Israel is the right brain. Egypt, Cain, is the left brain. Above, below, within, without, universe, soul. It's all the one story. It's all the one story. It's all that one representation. And God has this encoded everywhere. Or do you think that that's another one of these random flukes, coincidences of the Big Bang? Right? That there was nothing, then there was suddenly a massive ejaculation by a big dick somewhere, and then it created everything, including the single strand of DNA, which is impossible for that to not be elegant design. It's impossible. Or the human eyeball, which is impossible that is a random occurrence. And when you ask even Darwin himself, he said, yes, well, it's not really my theory. These are things that I posited. It's become a theory. It's become larger than me. And he said, if you ask my opinion on this theory attributed to my name, he said, well, you just have to sort of start and stop with a single strand of DNA in the human eyeball, and it makes what is being accredited to my discoveries rather impossible. And that's the guy who's accredited to Darwin and evolution, saying it's rather impossible if you just examine a single strand of DNA or the human eyeball. And by the way, both the single strand of DNA and the human eyeball are showing you both flat Earth. They're also showing you Jacob's ladder, and they're showing you Jesus Christ, and they're showing you the rising, and they're showing you the North Pole, the center pole, the journey to the center of the Earth. It's all there. It's all there. It's all there.
It's funny that you said that this esoteric physiological truth about who and what we are isn't taught in schools. Now, that's understandable. We can realize why that wouldn't be the case. But it's worse than that, because if you even say these truths to anyone, pretty much in the truth community, they just meet you with complete scorn. Like, oh, how can you believe that? And this is true of Christians as well. And they'll say that's cultish, that's blasphemy. And the real weirdness is that, so Satanism, I want to talk about the devil a little bit. This card is all about materialism and there being nothing other than the senses, the sensual world. Now, it's weird because it's almost like this materialism has been, people can't see that there's spirituality in the material. So the woo-woo Christian who believes that God is somewhere out there on a planet somewhere with a big beard probably sees us as the spiritual materialist who recognizes that actually, no, we're a creation of God, which means that our entire physiology is meant to connect us to God. And that's where a little bit of knowledge is not enough. If you notice, the devil is sat on this block which represents knowledge, but it's only half a block. It's only some of the knowledge, and that itself is really dangerous. And unless you have the whole picture, it cuts you off from the truth. I hope that made sense. But yeah, it's almost like inverted, that like this materialism, if you go all the way out and you don't recognize that physiology is spiritual, then you're a Satanist. If you go all the way the other way and think that that all matter is all there is and senses are all there is, you're a Satanist. You have to see that it's both. There has to be a crossing, literally.
So beautiful. And again, I touched on this yesterday on the show, but if you go back and please everyone, make sure that you take the time to watch and re-watch The Legend of Bagger Vance, Robert Redford's masterpiece, and re-watch it, because on that second round, so the first round, which is the first chakra, the first round was a total disaster and he was 12 strokes behind. And then came the tarde, the afternoon, and the second round. And he wants to hustle out there and just start hacking at the ball again. And Bagger says, I think it's time that we had a talk about the field. And he said, no, just give me my club. He goes, okay, you go out there and you just hack at it. And he says, okay, what's this field? And he says, take a look at Bobby Jones. Observe. So the first thing that we're taught to do by God is to observe, but not just anyone. BJ, somebody who's got their shit together with her, and that's Bobby Jones. He was in alignment to the mother. That's, he absolutely was. And he said, observe. So you become the observer, not the doer, because doer is violent. Doer is violence. You become the observer. And then what follows is, and that's different from doing. You see, when you just go out there and you do, you really are hacking. You're hacking away at the mother, upon the mother's plane. You have no plan, no idea. Excuse me. You have no plan, no idea. And then off you go to just hack and swing. And then you're just shocked at all the chaos that follows. And so what Bagger is saying to Juna 74, Jesus 74, and everybody calls him Juna in the entire movie. And what he says is that observe. So when you become the observer, you're peaceful. And that's exactly what happened. The music changed. The cinematography changed. Everything became etheric and sort of esoteric and not literal. The background faded away. Everything became fuzzy in the background. There was no pinpoint accuracy. Everything just became a field, a large field where everything played a role in that field. And he said, watch him, observe him, become the observer. And then what follows is not doing, what follows just is. And that's what Bagger teaches Juna, where he says, there is a shot that's already chosen for you. It's already done. Get out of your own way. Get out of the way and let the shot choose you. Get out of your way and let the shot choose you. Don't think about it. Feel it in your hands. Your hands are a lot wiser than your mind is ever going to be. And when he says that, he's talking about that left brain, because that's the thinking brain. That's thinking. Get out of your mind thinking what shot you should take and just do. Just let it be. That's what follows, is the let it be, what is. And so that only occurs if you first are the observer, which is a non-violent, pacifist, Gandhi-like act, is the observer. So he observed Bobby Jones, and you could see he became spellbound. But to her, which is the virgin, Virgo, not the Babylon whore. The Babylon whore is out there. They're the ones in the gallery, in the background, and they're yelling and they're screaming and they're cheering, but some of them are also making fun and laughing, and they have to go. So what does Robert Redford do? When he's finished watching, when Juna 74, Jesus 74, when Juna stops observing Bobby Jones and steps out there, what's the first thing Redford then shows you? The crowd disappears. The flag comes to him. So what does he say? He says, probably the most important line in the entire movie, a movie filled with important lines. And he says, you can't see that flag as some dragon that you got to fight every single day. Said, you got to love it. You got to become one with it. That's the field. The dragon can't be killed. You win for a day, but when you rise the following day, the dragon rises with you. So this is not a war that you kill. You do this for a while, but then you get tired because you realize you're still playing the same game of going around and around the wheel. Now you're just this warrior constantly killing the dragon, but it wakes up with you the next day, and you're just as vulnerable to temptation and sin as the next person, even though you killed the dragon the day before. So you can't see that dragon as something you have to kill, Juna. You have to become one with it. That's the field. It's not something to be conquered. It's something to be won. And there's a big difference, because when you unite him with her, that's the W. That is him in her, and that's everything. You've won when you own the now. You've won when you own the now. And that's what's being showed to you. And then everything's silence. The crowd has disappeared. The flag comes rushing forward. He's in a dreamlike state, and he just starts to swing. And what's incredible is when they zoom in on Juna, they show his sweater, and it's all zoomed in. And it's a very nice sweater, but it's got wear and tear to the trim and to the fringe and to the lining everywhere, because it's an allegory, because that sweater is him. That is the totality of his costumes and his roles that he's been playing. And this is the weight that we all carry. This is the wear and tear that exists, but it's not on our body, it's on our psyche. And that's a prelude to soul. So that's why they take the time to zoom in and show the wear and tear on Juna, but it all gets healed as soon as he simply lets go. And he didn't choose the shot. He didn't think about the shot. He just did it. It followed. It was natural. He was the natural. It just occurred. And then he looks at Bagger in utter disbelief as to the beauty that he just created. And then off they go. And now he's just talking to Bagger about more and more about the field. And so they then come up to his first shot. And then what does Juna do? Within like 5 seconds, he's taken the shot and they're walking again, and he's talking to Bagger about the field. So he wasn't even thinking. There was no thinking involved. And then they show the third shot, which is on the green, and he taps it in for an eagle. So on his resurrection, which is the first hole of the second round, which is 1 and 2, which is 12, which is 21, which is 3, which is complete. On the first hole of the second round, he scores an eagle, which is 3 of 5. He got it in 3 instead of par, which is 5. He got it in 3, and he got an eagle, which is 2 off, but an eagle soars. So you see, it's all allegorical. He stopped thinking, and in 3 shots, father, mother, child, it was in the hole. And suddenly, instead of being 12 strokes behind, he was 10 strokes behind. Everything began to change, just like that. And that's this perfect allegory in that perfect movie about take no thought for your life. There's nothing more Christ-like, but try and tell that to a Christian, and you know, like Aaron Gore was saying, they run you out of town. So let me pass that back over to you guys, and then we're gonna hop into the book.
Everything you just said, Ben, about that movie, which I've not seen yet, it perfectly describes how Bruce Lee approached his philosophy of fighting. You know, it was shapeless. It was be formless. He said, be like water, because he took his ego out of the equation when he was fighting. He was in the moment totally. There was no self and other in the way the ego has it. There is just a movement. His Tao of Jeet Kune Do, his philosophy means the way of the intercepting fist. So it was any situation that comes up, because he wasn't in too many minds, like in the Last Samurai. He was able to just be quicker than everyone else, because there wasn't that delay, that the ego didn't need to think about what it was doing. It just did. There wasn't doing, it just was. And that's why he was the master, and always will be in my mind. And I just hope he is coming back at some point. Yeah, just no set way of being, because life is constantly changing. You can't predict what's going to happen ahead of it, because you will always be behind. There'll always be a delay, and you'll never response. Your response will never be able. You'll never have true response ability to what's happening. It will always be a reaction rather than a response, and there's a big difference in that. So yeah, big hero, love him.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it seems like there is. Go ahead, Charlie. Sorry, I think there's a little lag internet-wise.
It's just funny that Aragorn brings this up, and this is what's making the rounds on all these different channels on YouTube now. That Charlie Freak is an actor, and that I'm Brandon Lee. So it's perfect that Aragorn just brought up Bruce Lee and I am water. And then there's Brandon Lee, and Brandon Lee absolutely loved his mother and father, loved his father so very much, and followed in his footsteps. And again, another movie that absolutely has to be watched again and again so that you fully get it is The Crow, because in The Crow, he's showing you that he has to go, but he'll be back, but he has to go. And so he's foreshadowing his own John Galting, and he's also then telling you that he's doing this because it's about the children, it's about women, and it's about fighting Satan. And that's why in the movie, the character who opposes his angelic return to set things aright is Lucifer, Satan. Absolutely was. So that is another movie. So write it down, and if you haven't seen it yet, just download it. Easy to find, and it's The Crow with Brandon Lee. And remember, near the very end of the filming of The Crow, Brandon Lee was accidentally killed because the prop gun magically had a real bullet in it, and he was shot. And he was taken to the hospital, and 2 days later, he succumbed to his wounds, and he died. So he was 3 days and 3 nights after the gunshot in tribulation and pain and suffering, and then he died. They rolled back the rock, but there was no body there. Nobody is nobody. And so that's the story that they want to tell you, that this happened. That's what they tell you. This literally happened on the set, that somebody put a real gun in replace of the prop gun, and he was shot and killed. And if you want to believe that stuff, that's up to you.
And Bruce Lee died in his 33rd year, just a coincidence. You know, just when he's about to become Christed, he disappears so that he can actually do that journey uninterfered with the Cabal.
That's right. And so you have to go to Atlantis. That's why Ayn Rand wrote that all of the people who were John Galted went to a place called Atlantis, protected by a magnetic electrical field that was there but could not be seen by the demons. They could not see, but it was there. And that's what I think is the existence with Atlantis. Atlantis is still here, but we cannot see it. Why are there so few land masses in the southern hemisphere, in the oceans of the southern hemisphere? Why are there so few land masses? Doesn't make a lot of sense. Something's missing. Something's missing. And what did who was the general that went to Antarctica and then he headed
Admiral Byrd.
Admiral Byrd, that's right. And Admiral Byrd, in that famous, the man's not a moron. And so he's on NBC talking about his years in Antarctica and these operations that he and the military were running to check the dome, Operation High Jump, and to check the existence of the dome and is there a passageway through and can we get through it and all this stuff. And he comes to NBC News and he says, I have seen a landmass beyond Antarctica. He said it's about the size of the Americas. And he said that there are more natural resources in their raw form than likely exist on all the other continents. So he said, I'm quite surprised that no other corporation has actually taken advantage or availed themselves of all of these materials when they're all crying that they're running out of materials. So is that an accident? Is that stupidity? Was he, losing his mind at that point, Alzheimer's or something? Or was that staged? And was that being said on purpose? And was that speaking a truth, a message, but only for those with the eye to see? The eye to see or the eye to hear? Because it sure sounded like a message to me. So, because what else can you draw from this? Beyond Antarctica is a landmass the size of the Americas, and it is loaded with all of the materials that one could ever hope for. Admiral Byrd.
And the bird sure sang. And I just wanted to comment on the whole, observation thing you guys were talking about. And earlier you showed the devil card, and here I have B lock because you said blocked. Well, of course, because the block is the being of locked, right? And it kind of looked like a chest. I'm not sure. Was it a chest, Aragorn, in the card? You're muted right now, so I can't hear.
No, it's more like just a leaden block that's holding these two, okay. Adam and Eve in the lower form, slaves, basically.
Yeah, got it. But anyhow, usually we're blocked in the chest. We're blocked in the middle way. That's why you're in your animal chakras and you're still in that survival mode. So really, when you open the lock, I mean, usually you could say it's listening, you could say it's love, because love is listening, it's communication. When you can communicate with the earth, suddenly you can open your chest and you can share your value with everyone. And it's not this victimhood consciousness where you're like, oh, I gotta hide everything, I gotta keep to myself, and I gotta be predatorial. No. So really, when you observe, you're serving AB, father, mother, or Abraham. So you're an observer. You're the server of Abba. And it's R because it's the chi. And then at the same time, so 18 chi, life force, radiation reduces to 9. So it's consciousness. So you're serving your father and mother with consciousness, right? And really, subject and object are the same. Observer is the observed. And when they are not the same, that's when duality comes in. That's when separation comes in. That's where violence comes in. So yeah, I wrote down here, violence is separation. So you have to know that you are the world, or what you see is what you are, right? So if you see ugliness, the world's going to be real ugly for you. And so really,
and that's the heart and soul of the secret, Eugene. I mean, it really is. all these books selling millions of copies and shows and movies being done about The Secret. I mean, that's this very simplicity of The Secret is simply that. So when you find yourself in that negative mode, bitching, moaning, complaining about everything, your life stinks and you're a victim and blah, 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 on and on and on and on it goes, and around the wheel goes. And the more that you fuel it, feed us, the more you feed them, and then the faster your wheel goes. And then it just seems like, and that's the thing, like deja vu is a gift from God to you. And as I was saying a couple of weeks back, most people don't even get a whiff of deja vu anymore. They don't get those deja vu moments in their life. That's a mercy from God for you to go, wake up, because this wheel is now spinning so fast and so out of control. But again, there's a silver lining in every situation, because eventually it'll spin so fast you'll get thrown from the ride. You'll hit bottom. And then you have that last choice. And that is your last choice. That's to push off and come back up, to rise, or that is to sink into oblivion, which is your choice. It's always a choice. So when things get worse and worse for you, don't bitch and moan and complain. It's a mercy. It's a mercy so that the story can end and that the eucatastrophe can occur. So again, all of this for Aragorn, there's a difference between the movie and the book of The Lord of the Rings. And I understand why Peter Jackson did what he did, but the way Tolkien wrote it is that Aragorn saw everything that was happening was for him. Everything was setting the stage for his role to be played, and that he was ready for that role. He was absolutely ready, willing, and able, because he was egoless, because he had nothing. He held promise for everything. I mean, what was coming potentially to Aragorn was literally everything, including Arwen. The milk to his honey, the silver to his gold. Wow. Everything was coming his way, but he had nothing. So everything that Aragorn did was on hope. That's why there's that fan-based movie that was done. It's very, very good. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Born of Hope. And it's a fan-based movie about Aragorn. It's about an hour long. And it's about Aragorn's journey to capture Gollum and then return Gollum to the Elves. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. This is a group of who crowdfunded it. This is a group of Tolkien fans who made this in homage to their love for Tolkien and these characters, which are larger than life, because they're you. Any character, anybody who appears to you to be larger than life is because you're seeing you in that character. And that's how they become larger than life. That's why the Bible is larger than life, because it's you and you recognize you and all these different characters. But just if you ever said that, somebody would kick the living crap out of you if you tried to say that. How dare you? I'm offended that you would even say that. You're not Moses.
You're a cult.
Noah. You're a cult. You're a cult and you're a kook. And just before we jump into the book, I'll just quickly go back to that image. And I just want you to see what was written here. And it says, I have some research I have done. I think just an infiltrated group. Charlie is Brandon Lee. Eugene looks identical to Brandon at the same age. So now remember, that's good in one realm. I'm not making fun of this person at all, because the similarities are startling. There's no doubt about it. The similarities are startling. But you see, this is just like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. This is just like Jesus in the sky rising, and literal Jesus on earth. So it's beautiful. It's not bad. I'm not making fun of this person at all, because the similarities are incredible, are absolutely incredible. So it's good that people are noticing this. But just know that while it's not literal in this case, it absolutely isn't. Colleen, I've always said, we're just Charlie and Colleen. That's it. I don't want to put helium into your balloon and then burst your bubble later for you. We're just two kids from Canada. That's it. We have no famous parents. We have no connections to anyone or anything. So that's why we tell you those things. But at the same time, there is a part of Brandon Lee that's in me. There's no doubt about it. And there's a part of Brandon Lee that's in Aragorn. And there's a part of Brandon Lee and Bruce Lee that is in Eugene and Aragorn and myself. We are powerfully connected to Bruce and Brandon Lee. I always have been my whole life. So has Aragorn. So has Eugene. Eugene, I believe Eugene and Aragorn have had discussions themselves about this. And they're both of their connection to it as well. So just know it's God. That's how this all plays out. So there is a higher truth, but then there is a literal play out of that truth. And you can be in that movie if your frequency is at that level. But if you want to be a bitcher and a moaner and a complainer, you'll never get into the Bruce Lee, Brandon Lee movie. You won't. It's only for Aragorn and Eugene because they chose to cast their nets to the right, and now they're stars in the biggest movie of all time. And when all of this is done and they make up a book about all the people that made a difference in this world, Aragorn's name will be in there. Eugene's name will be in there. Justin's name will be in there. Sandra's name will be in there. Josh X's name will be in there. Santos's name will be in there. Because they stood up and did what was right, not what was expedient. They didn't think, they did. They didn't act, actor. They didn't act, they followed. They followed the shepherd who came to them. And maybe that's part of the role that I've played, that Colleen and I have played, that in a way we are shepherds, but we're not the shepherd. I am not Jesus Christ. Thank God that no one in this chat group has ever gotten to that point, because everybody outside always says that, but nobody in here says that. I am not. But it doesn't mean that a part of me hasn't embraced that Christic energy. People say that to me all the time, that they see that all the time. And we embrace that. Colleen and I have the right to speak about Jesus Christ because we live his teachings. That's what we do. We studied it for ourselves, but we do it. And that's the difference. So we have a right to speak to Jesus Christ. But I'm not Jesus Christ. But Jesus Christ is within me. And Jesus Christ will manifest in those that he can. So what does Bagger say towards the end of the week? Juna says, Bagger, you're one hell of a caddy. and Bagger says, well, I do my best with what I got to work with. It doesn't make me super special. It just means there's so few people that answered the call. Jesus and God have got to work with what they've got to work with. So sometimes it looks like me because there's nobody else that answered the call. But if you want to be in this movie, like Aragorn is now and Eugene is now, then you got to answer the call. And it's a feeling. It's not a thinking. And you do it because it's right, not because it's expedient. They didn't act, they followed the shepherd. Perfect. What's Bilbo Baggins doing in this story? Bilbo stopped and thought about any of the shit that he was doing, especially with the spiders. He'd be halfway back to Bag End by now. But he's not thinking, he's following a path that has been laid out for him. And who would do that? Who would lead him into temptation? Mirkwood. Who would lead him into temptation? God. Because God knew that Bilbo Baggins 99 had what it took to get through Mirkwood. That's why Bilbo is the one that climbed the tree broke through the spider's web, the net. Remember, we have a net right here. Remember, how does your skull actually work? Inside is the soft mother, the pia mater. It's very soft and it's beautiful because it's pia mater, which is soft mother. Then there's the arachnid. I'm not making these names up. This is what's in Gray's Anatomy. This is what is taught to doctors. Above the pia mater is the arachnid, which is a web, which is a cobweb, and it holds everything together. It's foolproof. And then above is the dura mater, hard shell, hard head, father. Father, the arachnid, mother. So Bilbo breaking through the canopy of the trees in Mirkwood is opening, which is the swastika, which is the whole purpose to this story and journey. There's no more gray rain curtain of this world. That's rolling back the rock. That's the fornix rolling back. And then the top of your head is open. And then the Big Dipper going around that center star, the North Star. And that's what it does. Every night, the Big Dipper just brings down to you what you need and pours it into the opening in your head. And then it goes back up for more and it comes back down and it fills you. It's a wheel. It's a wheel. The Big Dipper is a wheel. That's what it does through the night. If you sat outside and you watched it, you'll see the Big Dipper do this every single night. And every single night, it's in the same position going around that same one star.
How could that be if we're spinning through the galaxy at 66,600 miles per hour? That's rubbish, Charlie. What are you talking about?
Incredible. Their story is just incredible. And people buy into it and then attack you for the simplicity of God's creation. And they will defend this insane, complex theory. It's incredible. Truly.
Because they've got so much going on in their mind that it has to be complex, Charlie, because things couldn't just be simple and open. And that's what I want to say, actually, to jump on what Eugene said before about the block to be locked. You said that often you get blocked in your chest and your chest gets locked. And what do we see in a lot of people when they've got wounds in their heart and they're not open? They hunch over because they're protecting the heart chakra. And if you look, it's perfectly shown why that is in this tarot card. Sorry to bring up tarot again, but it just shows it so perfectly. This woman is blocked in her chest because she's caught. The swords in tarot of the mind are our thoughts. Her heart is so closed because she's caught in duality. She can't make the choice that God is setting out for her because her ego is saying, no, there's two choices. There's always two choices. And there's always free will. You can make the choice that God isn't setting out for you. But if you do, you'll stay tense because you're not flowing like God wants you to, like Bilbo does throughout the story. He's flowing along the paths that are set for him. In fact, even in this chapter, Tolkien even says Bilbo tried to think about how to escape, but nothing came up for him. The more he thought about it, the more stuck he felt, essentially. And it was when he was nosing and wandering about that he discovered, through intuition, through just being led by God, a solution. Because he wasn't thinking, he was moving, he was flowing like the river. He was being formless.
He was observing. He began to observe the elves, right? Once he started observing the elves, a plan came to shape inside of his mind, is how Tolkien describes it. We're going to get it. Can you put that card back up again? And thank you for that, Aragorn. That's brilliant. And that is so true. Look at the crescent moon is frowning upon this image as well. So it's moved. And also remember, when you're looking at these things, you're always looking at the perspective is reversed to us. So our right is actually left and our left is actually right. So you're always looking from the perspective of the character. So notice how the grass is always greener to the right. Take a look at the level. So you see the white shore of the father below, then you see the green grass of the mother. And where is she cast her green grass? to the right, to the right. That's why the grass is always greener upon the right side. And there's just the symbolism. And by the way, look at the clouds behind the symbol in the shape of a firmament, which is the firm mind, which is the answer, which is the way, but she's blind and she can't see in this moment that there's a choice, and all she has to do is choose the right hand path and cast her net to the right. And then that's that firmament in the cloud behind her. That's the answer. That's the way. That's the thing with all of these cards. In all of these cards, that's why what Aaron does and the services he offers are so valuable and so important. Colleen has availed herself upon this again and again and again, and it powerfully helps her so much. Aaron has just been such a selfless, beautiful, wise, selfless giver through all of this. But all of these cards are showing you the whole truth. Nothing is not for naught. It's all for something. There is a reason for everything. Every brush stroke counts in God's creation. And that's why you have to slow down. That's why you have to still the mind. That's why you have to suspend time. That's why when you're born, you're gifted a minimum of 1,000 years, because you have to go so slow to observe every brush stroke. Every striation in a rock is a message. Every striation in that mountain of rocks is telling you something. And you have to take the time to be able to observe what is being said.
And she's not actually looking, she's not observing. She's so caught up in the inner world, and her thoughts are flying around at 1,000,000 miles an hour that she can't observe reality, which is why she's so blocked and caught between two choices. She can't make a move. She's tense. No swords are there. Like she's ready to attack anyone that tries to make her make this decision, because she still wants to have that free will, which, yeah, we need free will, but we also, the whole point of free will is that we surrender to the will, to thy will, not my will.
Wow. That's just so brilliant. And that is just wow. That is so good. Okay. So this is chapter 9, which is divine. And how do we get to divinity? Barrels out of bondage. Barrels out of bond. And remember, in maritime admiralty law, each of you have a surety against you. Not for you, against you. And this is a bond. That's why they sell bonds. And that's why bonds are guaranteed, lower interest, but a guaranteed investment, because they're sureties.
Yeah, Charlie, that's me. Just let me in. I'm gonna go to the bathroom when Aragorn reads.
Okay. I just like you.
I have that effect. I have that effect on people.
And Aragorn, it's a compliment, because I want to listen to you even when I'm doing my business.
I didn't realize. Oh, okay. I thought you were fleeing. Thought I was my tone was the brown sound.
I'm bringing you with me, man.
Excellent. Do you want me to read, Charlie?
Absolutely. So this is Barrels Out of Bond. Wow.
Okay. So chapter 9, Barrels Out of Bond. The day after the battle with the spiders, Bilbo and the dwarves made one last despairing effort to find a way out before they died of hunger and thirst. They got up and staggered on in the direction which 8 out of the 13 of them guessed to be the one in which the path lay, but they never found out if they were right. Such day as there ever was in the forest was fading once more into the blackness of night, when suddenly out sprang the light of many torches all round them like hundreds of red stars. Out leapt wood elves with their bows and spears and called the dwarves to a halt. There was no thought of a fight. Even if the dwarves had not been in such a state that they were actually glad to be captured, their small knives, the only weapons they had, would have been of no use against the arrows of the elves that could hit a bird's eye in the dark. So they simply stopped dead and sat down and waited, all except Bilbo, who popped on his ring and slipped quickly to one side. That is why, when the elves bound the dwarves in a long line, one behind the other, and counted them, they never found or counted the hobbit. Nor did they hear or feel him trotting along well behind their torchlight as they led off their prisoners into the forest. Each dwarf was blindfolded, but that did not make much difference, for even Bilbo, with the use of his eyes, could not see where they were going, and neither he nor the others knew where they had started from anyway. Bilbo had all he could do to keep up with the torches, for the elves were making the dwarves go as fast as ever they could, sick and weary as they were. The king had ordered them to make haste. Suddenly the torches stopped, and the hobbit had just time to catch them up before they began to cross the bridge. This was the bridge that led across the river to the king's doors. The water flowed dark and swift and strong beneath, and at the far end were gates before the mouth of a huge cave that ran into the side of a steep slope covered with trees. There the great beeches came right down to the bank till their feet were in the stream. Across this bridge, the elves thrust their prisoners, but Bilbo hesitated in the rear. He did not at all like the look of the cavern mouth, and he had only made up his mind not to desert his friends just in time to scuttle over at the heels of the last elves before the great gates of the king closed behind them with a clang. Inside the passages were lit with red torchlights, and the elf guards sang as they marched along the twisting, crossing, and echoing paths. These were not like those of the goblin cities. They were smaller, less deep underground, and filled with a cleaner air. In a great hall with pillars hewn out of the living stone sat the elven king on a chair of carven wood. On his head was a crown of berries and red leaves, for the autumn was come again. In the spring he wore a crown of woodland flowers. In his hand he held a carven staff of oak. The prisoners were brought before him, and though he looked grimly at them, he told his men to unbind them, for they were ragged and weary. Besides, they need no ropes in here, he said. There is no escape from my magic doors for those who are once brought inside. Long and searchingly he questioned the dwarves about their doings, and where they were going to, and where they were coming from, but he got little more news out of them than out of Thorin. They were surly and angry, and did not even pretend to be polite. What have we done, O king? Said Balin, who was the eldest left. Is it a crime to be lost in the forest, to be hungry and thirsty, to be trapped by spiders? Are the spiders your tame beasts or your pets, if killing them makes you angry? Such a question, of course, made the king angrier than ever, and he answered, It is a crime to wander in my realm without leave. Do you forget that you were in my kingdom, using the road that my people made? Did you not 3 times pursue and trouble my people in the forest, and rouse the spiders with your riot and clamour? After all the disturbance you have made, I have a right to know what brings you here, and if you will not tell me now, I will keep you all in prison until you have learned sense and manners. Then he ordered the dwarves each to be put in a separate cell and to be given food and drink, but not to be allowed to pass the doors of their little prisons until one at least of them was willing to tell them all he wanted to know. But he did not tell them that Thorin was also a prisoner with him. It was Bilbo who found that out. Poor Mr. Baggins. It was a weary long time that he lived in that place all alone, and always in hiding, never daring to take off his ring, hardly daring to sleep, even tucked away in the darkest and remotest corners he could find. For something to do, he took to wandering about the Elven King's palace. Magic shut the gates, and he could sometimes get out, if he was quick. Companies of the Wood Elves, sometimes with the king at their head, would from time to time ride out to hunt, or to other business in the woods, and in the lands to the east. Then, if Bilbo was very nimble, he could slip out just behind them, though it was a dangerous thing to do. More than once he was nearly caught in the doors as they clashed together when the last elf passed. Yet he did not dare to march among them because of his shadow, altogether thin and wobbly as it was in torchlight, or for fear of being bumped into and discovered. And when he did go out, which was not very often, he did no good. He did not wish to desert the dwarves, and indeed he did not know where in the world to go without them. He could not keep up with the hunting elves all the time they were out, so he never discovered the ways out of the wood, and was left to wander miserably in the forest, terrified of losing himself, until a chance came of returning. He was hungry too outside, for he was no hunter, but inside the caves he could pick up a living of some sort, by stealing food from store or table when no one was at hand. I am like a burglar that can't get away, but must go on miserably burgling the same house day after day, he thought. This is the dreariest and dullest part of all this wretched, tiresome, uncomfortable adventure. I wish I was back in my hobbit hole, by my own warm fireside, with the lamp shining. He also wished, too, that he could get a message for help sent to the wizard, but that, of course, was quite impossible, and he soon realised that if anything was to be done, it would have to be done by Mr. Baggins, alone and unaided. Eventually, after a week or 2 of this sneaking sort of life, by watching and following the guards, and taking what chances he could, he managed to find out where each dwarf was kept. He found all their 12 cells in different parts of the palace, and after a time he got to know his way about very well. What was his surprise one day to overhear some of the guards talking and to learn that there was another dwarf in prison too, in a specially deep, dark place. He guessed at once, of course, that that was Thorin, and after a while he found that his guess was right. At last, after many difficulties, he managed to find the place when no one was about, and to have a word with the chief of the dwarves. Thorin was too wretched to be angry any longer at his misfortunes, and was even beginning to think of telling the king all about his treasure and his quest, which shows how low-spirited he had become. When he heard Bilbo's little voice at his keyhole, he could hardly believe his ears. Soon, however, he made up his mind that he could not be mistaken, and he came to the door and had a long whispered talk with the hobbits on the other side. So it was that Bilbo was able to take secretly Thorin's message to each of the other imprisoned dwarves, telling them that Thorin, their chief, was also in prison close at hand, and that no one was to reveal their errand to the king. Not yet, not before Thorin gave the word. For Thorin had taken heart again, hearing how the hobbits had rescued his companions from the spiders, and was determined once more not to ransom himself with promises to the king of a share in the treasure until all hope of escaping in any other way had disappeared, until in fact the remarkable Mr. Invisible Baggins, of whom he began to have a very high opinion indeed, had altogether failed to think of something clever. The other dwarves quite agreed when they got the message. They all thought their own shares in the treasure, which they regarded as theirs in spite of their plight and the still unconquered dragon, would suffer seriously if the Wood Elves claimed part of it, and they all trusted Bilbo. Just what Gandalf had said would happen, you see. Perhaps that was part of his reason for going off and leaving them. Bilbo, however, did not feel nearly so hopeful as they did. He did not like being depended on by everyone, and he wished he had the wizard at hand. But that was no use. Probably all the dark distance of Mirkwood lay between them. He sat and thought until his head nearly burst, but no bright idea would come. One invisible ring was a very fine thing, but it was not much good amongst 14. But of course, as you've guessed, he did rescue his friends in the end, and this is how it happened. One day, nosing and wandering about, Bilbo discovered a very interesting thing. The great gates were not the only entrance to the caves. The stream flowed under part of the lowest regions of the palace and joined the forest river some way further to the east, beyond the steep slope out of which the main mouth opened. Where this underground watercourse came forth from the hillside, there was a watergate. There the rocky roof came down close to the surface of the stream, and from it a portcullis could be dropped right to the bed of the river to prevent anyone coming in or out of that way. But the portcullis was often open, for a good deal of traffic went out and in by the watergate. If anyone had come in that way, he would have found himself in a dark, rough tunnel leading deep into the heart of the hill. But at one point, where it passed under the caves, the roof had been cut away and covered with great oaken trapdoors. These opened upwards into the king's cellars. There stood barrels and barrels and barrels, for the Wood Elves, and especially their king, were very fond of wine, though no vines grew in those parts. The wine and other goods were brought from far away, from their kinsfolk in the south, or from the vineyards of men in distant lands. Hiding behind one of the largest barrels, Bilbo discovered the trapdoors and their use, and lurking there, listening to the talk of the king's servants, he heard how the wine and other goods came up the rivers or overland to the long lake. It seemed a town of men still throve there, built out on bridges far into the water as a protection against enemies of all sorts, and especially against the dragon of the mountain. From Lake Town, the barrels were brought up the forest river. Often they were just tied together like big rafts and poled or rowed up the stream. Sometimes they were loaded onto flat boats. When the barrels were empty, the elves cast them out through the trapdoors, opened the watergate, and out the barrels floated on the stream, bobbing along until they were carried by the current to a far place down the river where the bank jutted out, near to the very eastern edge of Mirkwood. There they were collected and tied together and floated back to Lake Town, which stood close to the point where the forest river flowed into the long lake. For some time, Bilbo sat and thought about this watergate, and wondered if it could be used for the escape of his friends, and at last he had the desperate beginnings of a plan. The evening meal had been taken to the prisoners. The guards were tramping away down the passages, taking the torchlight with them, and leaving everything in darkness. Then Bilbo heard the king's butler bidding the chief of the guards good night. "Now come with me," he said, "and taste the new wine that has just come in. I shall be hard at work tonight, clearing the cellars of the empty wood. So let us have a drink first to help the labour." "Very good," laughed the chief of the guards. "I'll taste with you and see if it is fit for the king's table. There is a feast tonight, and it would not do to send up poor stuff." When he heard this, Bilbo was all in a flutter, for he saw that luck was with him, and he had a chance at once to try his desperate plan. He followed the two elves until they entered a small cellar, and sat down at a table on which two large flagons were set. Soon they began to drink and laugh merrily. Luck of an unusual kind was with Bilbo then. It must be potent wine to make a wood elf drowsy, but this wine, it would seem, was the heady vintage of the great gardens of Dorwinion, not meant for his soldiers or his servants, but for the king's feasts only, and for smaller bowls, not for the butler's great flagons. Very soon the chief guard nodded his head, and he laid it on the table and fell fast asleep. The butler went on talking and laughing to himself for a while, without seeming to notice, but soon his head too nodded to the table, and he fell asleep and snored beside his friend. Then in crept the Hobbit. Very soon the chief guard had no keys, but Bilbo was trotting as fast as he could along the passages towards the cells. The great bunch seemed very heavy to his arms, and his heart was often in his mouth, in spite of his ring, for he could not prevent the keys from making every now and then a loud clink and clank which would put him all in a tremble. First he unlocked Balin's door, and locked it again carefully as soon as the dwarf was outside. Balin was most surprised, as you can imagine, but glad as he was to get out of his wearisome little stone room, he wanted to stop and ask questions, and know what Bilbo was going to do, and all about it. "No time now," said the Hobbit. "You just follow me. We must all keep together and not risk getting separated. All of us must escape or none, and this is our last chance. If this is found out, goodness knows where the king will put you next, with chains on your hands and feet too, I expect. Don't argue, there's a good fellow." Then off he went from door to door until his following had grown to 12. None of them any too nimble. What with the dark, and what with their long imprisonment, Bilbo's heart thumped every time one of them bumped into another, or grunted, or whispered in the dark. "Drat this dwarfish racket," he said to himself, but all went well, and they met no guards. As a matter of fact, there was a great autumn feast in the woods that night, and in the halls above, nearly all the king's folk were merrymaking. At last, after much blundering, they came to Thorin's dungeon, far down in a deep place, and fortunately not far from the cellars. "Upon my word," said Thorin, when Bilbo whispered to him to come out and join his friends, "Gandalf spoke true, as usual. A pretty fine burglar you make, it seems, when the time comes. I am sure we are all forever at your service, whatever happens after this. But what comes next?" Bilbo saw that the time had come to explain his idea, as far as he could, but he did not feel at all sure how the dwarves would take it. His fears were quite justified, for they did not like it a bit, and started grumbling loudly in spite of their danger. "We shall be bruised and battered to pieces, and drowned too, for certain," they muttered. "We thought you had got some sensible notion when you managed to get hold of the keys. This is a mad idea." "Very well," said Bilbo, very downcast and also rather annoyed. "Come along, back to your nice cells, and I will lock you all in again, and you can sit there comfortably and think of a better plan. But I don't suppose I shall ever get hold of the keys again, even if I feel inclined to try." That was too much for them, and they calmed down. In the end, of course, they had to do just what Bilbo suggested, because it was obviously impossible for them to find their way into the upper halls, or to fight their way out of the gates that closed by magic, and it was no good grumbling in the passages until they were caught again. So following the Hobbit, down into the lowest cellars they crept. They passed a door through which the chief guard and the butler could be seen, still happily snoring with smiles upon their faces. The wine of Dorwinion brings deep and pleasant dreams. There would be a different expression on the face of the chief guard the next day, even though Bilbo, before they went on, stole in and kind-heartedly put the keys back on his belt. "That will save him some of the trouble he is in for," said Mr. Baggins to himself. "He wasn't a bad fellow, and quite decent to the prisoners. It will puzzle them all too. They will think we had a very strong magic to pass through all those locked doors and disappear. Disappear? We've got to get busy very quick if that is to happen." Balin was told off to watch the guard and the butler and give warning if they stirred. The rest went into the adjoining cellar with trapdoors. There was little time to lose. Before long, as Bilbo knew, some elves were under orders to come down and help the butler get the empty barrels through the doors into the stream. These were in fact already standing in rows in the middle of the floor, waiting to be pushed off. Some of them were wine barrels, and these were not much use, as they could not easily be opened at the end without a great deal of noise, nor could they easily be secured again. But among them were several others which had been used for bringing other stuffs, butter, apples, and all sorts of things to the king's palace. They soon found 13 with room enough for a dwarf in each. In fact, some were too roomy, and as they climbed in, the dwarves thought anxiously about the shaking and the bumping they would get inside, though Bilbo did his best to find straw and other stuff to pack them in as cosily as could be managed in a short time. At last, 12 dwarfs were stowed. Thorin had given a lot of trouble, and turned and twisted in his tub, and grumbled like a large dog in a small kennel, while Balin, who came last, made a great fuss about his air holes, and said he was stifling, even before his lid was on. Bilbo had done what he could to close holes in the sides of the barrels and to fix on all the lids as safely as could be managed. And now he was left alone again, running around, putting the finishing touches to the packing and hoping against hope that his plan would come off. It had not been done a bit too soon. Only a minute or two after Barlin's lid had been fitted on, there came the sound of voices and the flicker of lights. A number of elves came laughing and talking into the cellars and singing snatches of song. They had left a merry feast in one of the halls and were bent on returning as soon as they could. "Where's old Gallion the butler?" said one. "I hadn't seen him at the table tonight. He ought to be here now to show us what is to be done." "I shall be angry if the old slope coach is late," said another. "I have no wish to waste time down here while the song is up." "Ha ha!" came a cry. "Here's the old villain with his head on a jug. He's been having a little feast all to himself, and his friend the captain. Shake him, wake him," shouted the others impatiently. Gallion was not at all pleased at being shaken or wakened, and still less at being laughed at. "You're all late," he grumbled. "Here I am, waiting and waiting down here, while you fellows drink and make merry and forget your tasks. Small wonder if I fall asleep from weariness." "Small wonder," said they, "when the explanation stands close at hand in a jug. Come, give us a taste of your sleeping draught before we fall to. No need to wake the turnkey yonder. He has had his share by the looks of it." Then they drank once round and became mighty merry all of a sudden, but they did not quite lose their wits. "Save us, Gallion," cried some. "You began your feasting early and muddled your wits. You've stacked some full casks here instead of the empty ones, if there is anything in the weight." "Get on with the work," growled the butler. "There is nothing in the feeling of weight in an idle tosspot's arms. These are the ones to go and no others. Do as I say." Very well, they answered, rolling the barrels to the opening. "On your head be it, if the king's full butter tubs and his best wine is pushed into the river for the lake men to feast on for nothing. Roll, 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 rolling down the hole. Heave ho, splash, plump, down they go, down they bump." So they sang as first one barrel and then another rumbled to the dark opening that was pushed over into the cold water, some feet below. Some were barrels really empty, some were tubs neatly packed with a dwarf in each, but down they all went, one after another, with many a clash and a bump, thudding on tops of ones below, smacking into the water, jostling against the walls of the tunnel, knocking into one another, and bobbing away down the current. It was just at this moment that Bilbo suddenly discovered the weak point in his plan. Most likely you saw it some time ago and have been laughing at him, but I don't suppose you would have done half as well yourselves in his place. Of course, he was not in a barrel himself, nor was there anyone to pack him in, even if there had been a chance. It looked as if he would certainly lose his friends this time. Nearly all of them had already disappeared through the dark trapdoor, and gets utterly left behind and have to stay lurking as a permanent burglar in the elf caves forever. For even if he could have escaped through the upper gates at once, he had precious small chance of ever finding the dwarves again. He did not know the way by land to the place where the barrels were collected. He wondered what on earth would happen to them without him, for he had not had time to tell the dwarves all that he had learnt or what he had meant to do once they were out of the wood. While all these thoughts were passing through his mind, the elves being very merry, began to sing a song around the river door. Some had already gone to haul on the ropes which pulled up the portcullis at the watergate, so as to let out the barrels as soon as they were all afloat below. "Down the swift dark stream you go, back to the lands you once did know. Leave the halls and caverns deep, leave the northern mountains steep, where the forest wide and dim stoops in shadow grey and grim. Float beyond the world of trees, out into the whispering breeze, past the rushes, past the reeds, past the marshes waving weeds, through the mist that riseth white, up from mere and pool at night. Follow, follow, stars that leap, up the heavens cold and steep. Turn when dawn comes over land, over rapid, over sand, south away and south away, seek the sunlight and the day. Back to pasture, back to mead, where the kine and oxen feed. Back to gardens on the hills, where the berry swells and fills. Under sunlight, under day, south away and south away. Down the swift dark stream you go, back to the lands you once did know. Now the very last barrel was being rolled to the doors. In despair and not knowing what else to do, poor little Bilbo caught hold of it and was pushed over the edge with it. Down into the water he fell, splash, into the cold dark water with the barrel on top of him. He came up spluttering and clinging to the wood like a rat, but for all his efforts he could not scramble on top. Every time he tried, the barrel rolled round and ducked him under again. It was really empty and floated light as a cork. Though his ears were full of water, he could hear the elves still singing in the cellar above. Then suddenly the trapdoors fell to with a boom, and their voices faded away. He was in the dark tunnel, floating in icy water, all alone, for you cannot count frames that are all packed up in barrels. Very soon, a grey patch came in the darkness ahead. He heard the creak of the water gate being hauled up, and he found that he was in the midst of a bobbing and bumping mass of casks and tubs, all pressing together to pass under the arch and get out into the open stream. He had as much as he could do to prevent himself from being hustled and battered to bits, but at last the jostling crowd began to break up and swing off, one by one, under the stony arch and away. Then he saw that it would have been no good, even if he had managed to get astride his barrel, for there was no room to spare, not even for a hobbit, between its top and the suddenly stooping roof where the gate was. Out they went under the overhanging branches of the trees on either bank. Bilbo wondered what the dwarves were feeling, and whether a lot of water was getting into their tubs. Some of those that bobbed along by him in the gloom seemed pretty low in the water, and he guessed that these had dwarves inside. I do hope I put the lids on tight enough, he thought. But before long, he was worrying too much about himself to remember the dwarves. He managed to keep his head above the water, but he was shivering with the cold, and he wondered if he would die of it before the luck turned, and how much longer he would be able to hang on, and whether he should risk the chance of letting go and trying to swim to the bank. The luck turned all right before long. The eddying currents carried several barrels close ashore at one point, and there for a while they stuck against some hidden root. Then Bilbo took the opportunity of scrambling up the side of his barrel whilst it was held steady against another. Up he crawled like a drowned rat and lay on the top, spread out to keep the balance as best he could. The breeze was cold, but better than the water, and he hoped he would not suddenly roll off again when they started off once more. Before long, the barrels broke free again and turned and twisted off down the stream and out into the main current. Then he found it quite as difficult to stick on as he had feared, but he managed it somehow, though it was miserably uncomfortable. Luckily, he was very light, and the barrel was a good big one, and being rather leaky, it had now shipped up a small amount of water. All the same, it was like trying to ride without bridle or stirrups a round-bellied pony that was always thinking of rolling on the grass. In this way, at last, Mr. Baggins came to a place where the trees on either hand grew thinner. He could see the paler sky between them. The dark river opened suddenly wide, and there it was joined to the main water of the forest river, flowing down in haste from the king's great doors. There was a dim sheet of water, no longer overshadowed, and on its sliding surface there were dancing and broken reflections of clouds and of stars. Then the hurrying water of the forest river swept all the company of casks and tubs away to the north bank, in which it had eaten out a wide bay. This had a shingly shore under hanging banks, and was walled at the eastern end by a little jutting cape of hard rock. On the shallow shore, most of the barrels ran aground, though a few went on to bump against the stony pier. There were people on the lookout on the banks. They quickly poled and pushed all the barrels together into the shallows, and when they had counted them, they roped them together and left them till the morning. Poor dwarves! Bilbo was not so badly off now. He slipped from his barrel and waded ashore, and then sneaked along to some huts that he could see near the water's edge. He no longer thought twice about picking up a supper uninvited if he got the chance. He had been obliged to do it for so long, and he knew now only too well what it was to be really hungry, not merely politely interested in the dainties of a well-filled larder. Also, he had caught a glimpse of a fire through the trees, and that appealed to him, with his dripping and ragged clothes clinging to him, cold and clammy. There was no need to tell you much of his adventures that night, for now we are drawing near the end of the eastward journey, and coming to the last and greatest adventure, so we must hurry on. Of course, helped by his magic ring, he got on very well at first, but he was given away in the end by his wet footsteps and the trail of drippings that he left wherever he went or sat, and also he began to snivel, and wherever he tried to hide, he was found out by the terrific explosions of his suppressed sneezes. Very soon there was a fine commotion in the village by the riverside, but Bilbo escaped into the woods, carrying a loaf and a leather bottle of wine and a pie that did not belong to him. The rest of the night he had to pass, wet as he was, and far from a fire, but the bottle helped him to do that, and he actually dozed a little on some dry leaves, even though the year was getting late and the air was chilly. He woke again with a specially loud sneeze. It was already grey morning, and there was a merry racket down by the river. They were making up a raft of barrels, and the raft elves would soon be steering it off down the stream to Lake Town. Bilbo sneezed again. He was no longer dripping, but he felt cold all over. He scrambled down as fast as his stiff legs would take him, and managed just in time to get onto the mass of casks without being noticed in the general bustle. Luckily, there was no sun at this time to cast an awkward shadow, and for a mercy he did not sneeze again for a good while. There was a mighty pushing of poles. The elves that were standing in the shallow water heaved and shoved. The barrels, now all lashed together, creaked and fretted. "This is a heavy load," some grumbled. "They float too deep. Some of these are never empty." If they had come ashore in the daylight, we might have had a look inside, they said. No time now, cried the raftman. Shove off. And off they went at last, slowly at first, until they had passed the point of rock where other elves stood to fend them off with poles, and then quicker and quicker as they caught the main stream and went sailing away, down, down towards the lake. They had escaped the dungeons of the king, and were through the wood, but whether alive or dead still remains to be seen.
Wow. Oh, beautiful. Absolutely. Hold on. Let me stop share screen, and you can put that back up. Put that back up and see if I can zoom in on you.
Yeah,
Wow.
I bought this from the Bodleian Library, which is where Tolkien used to read in Oxford. Yeah, so many great Tolkien memorabilia and tours you can take in Oxford. As much darkness as there is there, I'm sure there's so much goodness as well.
Tokens?
Yeah, my voice is going. Token Tolkien's.
Wow. Yeah. You know, I was very fortunate when I was young. There were so many great, because Victoria is little Britain in British Columbia, Canada, Victoria, and so there were a number of really cool bookstores, and they all had a great affinity for Tolkien, and there were so many things, and I was able to purchase, I think, 5 of the sketches in the Hobbit book that Professor Tolkien did, and they were about that being one of them. Yes, that's Rivendell, and I had Bag End upon Overhill, and showing Bag End from the water, which is very famous, and they were all about 18 inches wide and about 3 feet long. So they were great, and I just had them up on my walls. And the raft at the huts of the raft elves was one of them as well. So, and this is what was surrounding me in my room. And in my room, that's where I had my stereo system. So that's where all the albums were. That's where all the books were. That's where all the imagery was, and that's where my world was in that room. And what a wonderful job you did. And you're singing so good. Oh my gosh, so good. So now there's
not good enough to attempt it a second time.
no, it is really good. And so thank you very much for doing that. And so as you go through this in that chapter, there's so many things to discuss. So Bilbo originally locating 8 of the 13 dwarves, right? Because so that means that there are 5, so that's 5 8s, and then you just look at the fraction that is derived from that. But again, 13, 5 of 8 is very important, because 5 is crucifixion and 8 is eternity, and so to be able to reach eternal life, you have to first crucify. So it's another symbolic gesture of Tolkien saying he located 8 of 13, but there were 5 that were missing. These are the 5 physical senses, and this is the crucifixion that has to occur if they're going to escape the dungeons and then flow with the river, to be able to have a chance to enter in to the lonely mountain and then slay the dragon. So now when you're listening to all of this with a higher mind and more actual knowledge in your head, this is what should be taught to us from the very beginning, so that when you encounter these books, then you can connect right away to the higher truth that's being shared here. So again, they have to escape the dungeon. So this is getting out of the Muladhara root chakra. They're going to go the river. So that is then now the journey up the superhighway, which is the spine and the chakra system intertwining about the spine and the passage of these fluids. And again, remember, the spine is a river. It is a straight and narrow river, because inside of it, the crystic fluids that are the essence of us are passing And of course, remember, within you, the whole goal of your fluids are to rise up the spine and to come in to heaven upon earth, which is heaving to the heap of the hearth of the head. That's what your fluids do. The first place that they enter into is this first ventricle. And there are five ventricles. And of course, there is the, it's the fifth ventricle. And there are 5 ventricles. And then when you cast thy net to the right and you enter back to the brainstem into the hypoglossal, it's the only way to be able to enter into the 4th ventricle. And the 4th ventricle is a narrow, straight and narrow canal. It's tiny, infinitesimal space within you, but it exists. And all of these ventricles are crystic fluids inside of your skull, Golgotha, cavalry, place of skull. And it is only through this 4th ventricle that leads you to the 3rd ventricle. And
The stria pinealis?
You can bring the stria pinealis into this as another part of the journey, but that's later. That's later because that's after the pineal gland is illuminated, which cannot occur until Thorin places the Arkenstone upon his breast, which happened upon his crucifixion, his death, and there he was laid to rest under the mountain, so that he could eternally rise to the peak of the mountain. And then that's the volcano, and that is the flow that needs to happen within. So what I'm going to just do here, I'm going to put this up on the screen before we go any further. This is a wonderful page. Let me show you this one for a sec here. Just showing all of Tolkien's sketches that appear in The Hobbit. And this is one of the ones that I had. This is the hill, Hobbiton across the water. And again, this is created by Professor Tolkien. Crotchety old professor at Oxford writing this incredible story. Genius with all the alchemy that's in it. And then look at how incredible this is. So this shows you the water, and this town at the foot of the water is called Bywater. And this is where the Green Dragon Inn is located. And this is the mill. And then up the hill we go, and I'll just show you here, as it bends, where the bends is here, that's this little road that goes to the left is Bagshot Row. This is Bagshot Row. And there's 1, 2, 3 Bagshot Row. And the gaffer and Sam lived in number 3 Bagshot Row. So that's the gaffer, and Samwise is
residence
on the hill. That's right. And then here's this little path that they use, and the little hole in the gate, the hedge gate, that the gaffer and Sam used to be able to take the shortcut to Bilbo. And then there's the green door, and these are all the windows, and there's the crown.
Yeah, one tree on the top, and there's a Y right under it, huh?
Yeah, that's
all
right.
The windows are to the right as well.
That's right. And
if you're looking out.
That's right. So it's facing. That's right. All of the facing to the rising sun in the east. So it's just absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so let me stop on that, and I just want to take you.
Made me laugh when they were talking about packing them in with straw. I was looking after the dogs for my mum this weekend, and the chickens as well. But we've had Storm, what was it called? Eunice, good victory it means, and it just absolutely battered this chicken's outdoor cage. So they kept getting out and escaping. And obviously a fox would have had them. So I had to get them in the garage and literally pack them in with straw to make them happy. They're lovely, though. Lovely little girls.
Thank you for doing that. And again, the synchronicity is just incredible. It's just incredible after Storm Eunice. Okay, so now we're looking at another one of the posters that I had, and this is another beautiful, beautiful drawing by Professor Tolkien, and this is the entrance to the Elven King's Gate. So I want you to take a look at this, and I want everyone. We'll start obviously with Aragorn and Eugene. Tell me what you're seeing here, because this is so symbolic. If you want to be a king of the elves, then this is where your gate is. And look, it tells you where the gate is. This is Solomon's temple, obviously. So tell me what you see. Jump in.
Straight and narrow.
Straight and narrow.
And across the river, over the water.
That's right. I see a tomb and then a mountain, or you could also call it Zion, and then a winding road after, you go into the tomb, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, take a look in the foreground with the trees. What do the trees symbolize?
Thoughts?
Well, wouldn't that be 11? Are we not looking at the two temples?
Yes.
Yeah, so the line that is straight and narrow is always paved. It's a golden road, and it's always paved between the temples. That's where the magic city awaits you, is between the golden temples. So the line of trees represents 11:11. So we're looking at 11:11. God is calling you 11:11. This is the 11. In between is the pathway. And then, as Aaron said, there's the river we have to cross, which is the horizontal divide of the brain. So this is leaving the left brain, crossing the river Jacob to meet God face to face in a place called Pineal. So there's a door to the right. And in Solomon's temple, in the third room, 1, foreground 1, bridge 2, background 3. In the third room, there's a door to the right, which is the pineal gland. And there's that entrance. And this is why Tolkien drew it this way, and why it has to be this way, because you can't be an elven king unless this is where your palace is. So it's not below ground, is it? It's above ground. How do we know this is above ground? How do you know this is in your head? Why do you know that this image that Tolkien drew for you is in your head? Does he show you a dome? Does he show you a skull? Yeah. There's the skull. And Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. And that's the idea, that they don't fall down, and Jack never broke his crown, and they lived happily ever after on top of the crown. So this is cavalry. This is Golgotha. This is the place of the skull. And you have to enter in to the skull in the third room, in that door to the right. And that is the pine cone, the pineal gland. So,
those doors are controlled by magic as well. And that makes me think of the stone in front of the tomb as well, that rolls as if by magic.
That's right. And once, don't have to put bounds upon them in here. They're free to do as they will, and it's based on their will. So the doors will open to them. Speak, friend, and enter. Speak, friend, and depart. Because when you raise your vibration to that level, then the doors will open for you. But no spell that you cast will move the doors of the Elven King. And so this is, now take a look below, and let's take a look at the word. You guys can do this. Take a look at the word Elven King. What? There are 3 words in there. There's many actually in there. You can break this down again and again and again. But when you're looking at this, it's Elven King. So if we start with that, break down ELL, Ven, VEN, and then King, KING. What's being said?
Well, I think it has to do with the 11 king, which is the L evening, and that's also having to do with the temple, and it's right before 12, so it's right before the completion. And so this is the walk towards completion. King also has to do with knowing, it's the K and the G, which we get knight, like, the knight who gets honored and all that kind of stuff. And Gnostic, this GN or KN. So there's that. Here, I can't really see it because of my Zoom, and then gate is also G8. So it's 7 and 8. So there's that too. So after, you complete the soul, that's when, you're in the full Taurus field, and then that's the birth and, death, coming as one. And so you're a phoenix. And even in the word 8, it's like eat. So it's A and the E in the physical. So it's the alpha and the omega in the physical. And the could just be Theo, but yeah, that's what I see.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. We'll go to Aragorn in just a sec here, but that's really brilliant, Eugene. Again, the first thing that you pick up with the Elven king is that Elven is 11. and the reason that an Elven king would be 11 is because you're between the two temples, which is why all the Elven kings' halls are always between these great trees. They have to be, because that's between the 11, whether it's Celeborn and Galadriel, whether it's the sheer vertical cliffs, tree laden in Rivendell. It's always in this straight and narrow valley. It's always in this straight and narrow place, and it's always capped by the 11s, which are the temples. So it's always between the temples, and that is the Elevening of it. But when you break this down, Elven king, did you want to tackle that one, Aaron?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I wasn't even on mute. So I saw El as the divine child that has become venerable. So he's become worthy. So he's become able. And he's done that by becoming the kin of G. So he's become family with G, with God, with the 7. You could also see Ven as vain. So he's done that by raising the Christic seed through the blood up and to the right. That's what I saw.
Wow. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. Awesome as well. So now, if anyone knows in French, what is Thursday? What is Thursday in French? Isn't it vendredi?
Yeah.
Vendredi.
Excuse your French.
And in Spanish, it's jueves. Jueves is Spanish for Jupiter. Vendredi is for Jupiter. And so, and in Latin, ven is to go. It's another variation of ear to go, ear and ven. And so this is El is that, and this is Israel. So El is always the electrical light, which is the golden child who is born in the womb between the phallic of the father and the vagina of the mother. So this is the Star of David. Star of David is Jesus Christ. El is that Christic light that must go to the 11 to be 9, which is divine, rising and falling in God. To get to the gate, the Elven King's gate. So you can look at it that way. And very simply, again, the child to become king. So for Jesus to live his prophecy that he is the king of New Jerusalem, then he has to go. So the golden light of the child must go to become king. And so that's why. And then again, Elven king is symbolized in this image that you're seeing here. So above that, this tells you this is the head. That tells you this is the head. And then where we're looking is just above the level, because we see the straight and narrow way to the river, and there's a bridge. So that would be level. That would be the sphenoid bone would be upon the level. That's level earth. But just above that level is that door to the right, which would then be the pineal gland, which is just up and to the right. So everything is just perfect symbology. And entering within that door is a representation of God consciousness, which is 9. So that door can be seen as 9, which is the letter I. And then these trees are the 11, which can be seen as the letter K. So there's the K, there's the I, that in the making of the king. And then upon the crown is the G, which is God. And there's your word king. There's your word king in symbols. And that's how you interpret, that's God's language. That's not Rockefeller English. That's not Rothschild English. That's God's English. And this is how you read and write, through the clues, the symbology, the numerology that God left and encoded in everything for you. And Professor Tolkien is a shepherd, and he led us, everyone virtually that's here, he led us to be here now at this point in time. He did. And he did this through these incredible stories. But remember, there are millions who have read the same stories that we're reading, and they do not get any of this. And honestly, if they just dropped in from out there in to our chat room and were listening to this, they would literally probably think that we were smoking up from the crack pipe.
You're a cult. Yeah, they tell you to get thence.
Yeah, Justin is saying that this is on speaker view or something, and he said put it on gallery view or something. But yeah, another thing for, I think, a gate is G again 7, and then 8 is 8, right? If you take ATE as 8, then it would be 15. And 15 is the O or the void, and that's the 15 realms, you know, the 7 above, 7 below, and then the middle way. And that's why maybe the middle way is the gate, is the opening, because that's where everything is materializing, everything is happening. And so this is like the middle of the vibration, or you could say mesocosm. So maybe the 8 also has to do with the fact that, you know, this middle path is the entrance to the way up, or whatever you want to take it as.
Now, here's another huge point that I want both of you to discuss, is that how this played out with the capturing of the dwarves. Bilbo was not captured, because at the last second, that's the last second. And if that's the last second, there's no more time. So that's symbolizing Bilbo being in a whole different realm than the dwarves. So he could not be bagged up like the dwarves were by the trolls. Remember the trolls going way back when? They were all scooped up into bags. Bilbo was not in the bag. He's Bilbo Baggins, 99 Most High. So when they stumbled upon the elves once again, they were screwed. So the significance is this: Bilbo was chosen to be the lucky number instead of 13, which is bad luck. Bilbo was the 14th member of the company. So when Gandalf went away, they're back to 14. There's great significance in 14 because 14 is a fortnight. 14 days is a fortnight, and the moon shows herself for 14 days, and then she doesn't show herself for 14 days. And when she doesn't show herself for 14 days, you got work to do to be ready for when she shows herself again in that fortnight. So you got 2 weeks, 14 days to build the fort, or it's going to be lights out. It's going to be nighttime for you, and she will rule over those lower energies. Emotional energies will rule over you. So the significance of the number 14. Now, Bilbo doesn't get captured with the dwarves, so then it's a separation, and then it's now 13 and 1. So I wanted to pass that over to both of you and see if you wanted to take that further in terms of what Tolkien is telling us, saying to us here powerfully.
Go ahead, brother.
Well, the first thing that springs to mind is Bilbo is acting on behalf of God in a way. So he's become the one. He's the divine intelligence that's helping to free the 13, which is, you know, the 12 disciples plus Christ, Thorin. You know, you could see before Christ's awakening that he wasn't always Christed. He was just a man, just as we are before we do the work and we rise. So yeah, and whilst until we have that realization, we are caught in the maritime admiralty law. We're caught in the matrix until we realize that we need to step out of that So yeah, I think Bilbo is that divine intelligence. Yeah, that's what I see off the top of my head. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, that's it exactly. And again, if you're asking why 1301, because the Christic figure in this story is not Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo Baggins was there to shepherd them along the way. He's most high. Bilbo Baggins is 99, he's most high. So he's an emissary sent by God, which is how Aaron introduced that as well. Brilliant. And then Aaron got it perfectly, because then it's 13 and 1. And in that 13 is the Christic figure, which is Thorin. He's got a long, long way to go, because he's just a man. He's a man. And he's got a long way to go to rise to where Bilbo is operating from, which is most high, 99. Bilbo Baggins in Gematria, 99, most high. So that is. And then again, it's the law of attraction, Eugene, and it's just magnetism. Bilbo has got his crown going. Absolutely, Bilbo's got his game going. And so he can't be bagged by the trolls, and he can't be imprisoned in dungeons, because his energy, Bilbo's energy, cannot be trapped in a dungeon. It's too high. Bilbo's energy is too high. He can't go in a dungeon. So that was really brilliant, Aaron. And I didn't mean to put you guys on the spot, but I knew you do great. Eugenio.
Oh no, the spot is the S pot, the sine wave of the pot of gold. Anyway, I also think it could be a reference to like Mary, Jesus, and then the 12 disciples.
Yeah.
Because, like I think because why is there 13 dwarves? You know, it just happens to be, it's such a perfect thing, right? And I feel like the disciples kind of symbolize, in their own, they're imperfect, but together they make the whole picture. So I think there's that kind of imagery going on. And then 14 is N, as Aaron pointed out earlier, is the nun, is the fish, right? So it's again talking about water. And then we have negative from N. And so I also think that because as soon as you get to the negative side, the first sign you have is rest, or Libra, or the crown, or again, invisibility, because magnetism is invisible compared to electricity. So I also think there's that kind of symbology where the 12 symbolize electricity. And then again, Bilbo, I know that I've said this before, but Bilbo, he's the invisible one. And just like you said, Charlie, he can't be kept in the dungeon, because the dungeon is for electricity. He who is magnetic rises out of the dungeon, or is never in the dungeon in the first place, because he can't be seen. So there's that. And then he was wet and he was dripping and stuff. And at one point he said he had so many thoughts in his head, he was bursting with thoughts. So there's that too, because thoughts don't take you anywhere. So there, yeah. And go ahead, Charlie.
Oh, just I love listening to you guys. You're always getting it so right, and it's brilliant. So when you pointed out that there's another way of looking at that 14, because it is the 12 apostles, and then there's Jesus and Mary. Remember, Balin is part of a brother connection with Dwalin, Balin and Dwalin, and B is the sacred feminine, is the mother, and D is the stronger Dwalin, and is the fourfold nature of man. So B and D. So Balin, Dwalin. So with Balin, you have great wisdom. And Bilbo and Balin became lifelong friends through this. And it's Bilbo and Balin. Even Peter Jackson picked up this beautifully in the Hobbit movie as well, showing that powerful connection. They came to each other very easily together, because they were of a similar vibration. 5 letters in the name, 5 letters in the name. 55, JFK Jr., 55, Clarity, 55, 22, 55, 77, Christ 77. So I think what both of you are saying is absolutely right, and that's really a great pickup. And that's why both of their names would start with the B, and the letter B, and then it's BI. What is the whole point of this to BI? Because you're BA, which is you're born of the Father. you are to be godlike, rising in divinity. So, and so it's there's no mistakes here. They're both 5-letter names. They both start with the letter B. That's 22. And I think that's another great pickup. And they were lifelong friends. And so remember, everyone, in the Lord of the Rings, when the Fellowship has to go through Moria, what many of you, if you've only watched the movies, you may not pick up on, but in the Lord of the Rings, Balin eventually took a significant group of the dwarves from the Lonely Mountain and attempted to take back Moria, and there to go in search for true silver once more, the mithril. My thrill, my thrill is mithril, and so Balin took this expedition to take back Moria, which Balin ruled Moria. They were successful, but for how long? Only 5 years. Balin's kingdom in Moria lasted only 5 years. So in the movie, in The Lord of the Rings, when the Fellowship is in Moria and they come across that little tomb, that tomb is Balin's tomb. So that was a very powerful moment for Gandalf, who loved and valued Balin very much. And it would have been powerfully for Frodo, who Frodo knew the sacred importance of Balin to Bilbo. So it was a very special, powerful moment. And obviously for Gimli as well, who in a way, Balin was his uncle.
He was crying over that tomb, right? And just in distress.
He absolutely was, yeah. They were still holding out hope, but they hadn't heard from Balin's dwarves for over 20 years, I believe, and they were losing hope, and so that's another reason why they went there. So, yeah, I think that's a great pickup.
And then Fool of a Took started acting up.
Fool of a Took is the fall of man.
Drinking and smoking.
Now hold on here. Let me see what I can't even see this. What did I write here?
Yeah, and I've been seeing so many 55. It's insane.
It is lately. It is insane. And also when Aaron was reading, in the book, it talks about that they didn't want to share their gold with the elves, but it was more than that. At that point, the dwarves had learned to trust Bilbo. They all trusted Bilbo, just as Gandalf had said. And then Tolkien, this is a children's book, but Tolkien goes out of his way to point out that maybe that's partly why Gandalf left. And of course, partly that is true, because Gandalf could not enter into Mirkwood. He had to remove the source of what was murking the wood. Gandalf, who is so high, went to be able to remove the source of what was causing the murk in the wood, which was the necromancer, which is Sauron in disguise. So that's why Gandalf left. And then that is a godly Gandalf G7, God G7, is a godly act, because then it puts God's chosen one, which is the shepherd, Bilbo, to guide his flock. And isn't that funny how the smallest leads the many, how the smallest of us leads the large, or those that are larger than in life, and in the case of Thorin Oakenshield, and they all came to see Bilbo in a way as the leader of their company. And so that's another reason why Gandalf could not enter Mirkwood, and that's why Tolkien, humility is a hobbit.
And the dwarves had to to regain that childlike energy that Bilbo represents, like the fool in the tarot. Again, like we've said before, he succeeds through doing, well, to just walking rather than thinking, whereas the dwarves are constantly complaining and grumbling. You know, he doesn't think about it. The way reveals itself in the moment. Bilbo shows us the way because he doesn't resist what's going on. He just acts. You know, he doesn't run away like me and Eugene have been talking about quite a lot recently. He doesn't run away, which is separation. If you're running away from something, you are in separation. If you turn and face what is, you're bringing that thing into your consciousness, into your being. So you are becoming that thing without it, you know, taking hold of you. You're facing it courageously. He's facing his shadow. He's bringing the light of the awareness to that darkness. Even though we're in the Elven halls, we're still in an underworld journey. It's different to the goblins' underworld because we're not in the root chakra anymore. We're in the heart. So the air's cleaner. It's more refined. There's food, but there's still entrapment in that. So yeah, when he's not fleeing, he's not separate from what he needs to do.
Charlie is the Hobbit king.
This once again, this is the benefit of gematria. This is why God created gematria, why it exists, to always show you the way. So the Hobbit is humility. Eugene said, you better believe he's humility, because only the penitent man is he who can enter through the gate of the eye of the needle. It's easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than is a rich man into heaven, because a rich man has no penitence, has no humility at all, and therefore that's why a rich man has no humanity at all as well. And we're just fodder for their selfish plans. And the lower and lower they go, the more demonic, satanic their plans get. It's a process. Everything is a process. It's a war of attrition when you take that slippery slope, because that's going to lead you to eating children every single time. So a Hobbit, if you do the gematria of it, is 56, and light is 56. And hobbits are light on their feet. Isn't that what Tolkien literally says, both in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings? You can't hear them. They're very light on their feet. Light 56, Hobbit 56. You think this is a coincidence? Tolkien is encoding all of this. Now, what's the other great significance of 56? It can be reduced down to 11, and there's only one way to be able to get into the kingdom of heaven, and that's going on the path that is straight and narrow through the temples. And the temples are the 11, and God is calling you. It's incredible. It's just absolutely incredible. And again, what's the significance, the sacred significance of the hobbits, and especially Bilbo Baggins 2:22? Hobbits don't wear shoes. They go barefoot, so that they're electrical beings, and they can make mistakes, and they can be all the things that the left brain electrical world is. But what always helps the hobbits is that they're grounded in her. And that's why Tolkien had to make them barefoot to teach us that is the way. So the hobbits and Gandalf talks about this, hobbits possess a plain, simple common sense. Hobbit sense. Tolkien sort of writes and describes it as hobbit sense. And that hobbit sense is because they have bare feet. And that's where common sense comes from, because common is the ground. That's your common place, is the free earth that no man can claim. That's that free part of town. And that's why it's called a common place, because no one has claimed it. So there's no humility there. And so again, the symbology. So yeah, keep it coming, guys. But yeah. And then overall, just take a look at the significance of what's happening. The dwarves are in the dungeons, they're in the cellar, and they are trapped. They're prisoners. They're prisoners of their minds, because they're in the Elven King's dungeons, which are high. like Aaron said, this is not, they're not in the Misty Mountains with the orcs, which is the root Muladhara chakra down here. No. We just saw the symbology of the Elven King's Gate. The Elven King's Gate is here. That's the gate here. Those are those trees, and this is the gate, and that's where the Elven King is, because that's Elven is 11, and 11 is all even. Balance, and that's what an Elven King is. So Bilbo was free, one of 14, and the 13 were trapped, prisoners in their mind. That's why Tolkien, that's his drawing. Tolkien creates a dome above. That's the head. Of course it is. That's freedom. And so that plays out. And then beautifully, as Aragorn said earlier, how does the plan come about? Bilbo couldn't come up. He was miserable. Bilbo was miserable with himself because he couldn't come up with a single idea. And then
he goes nosing and wandering about. He's led by his intuition.
He becomes the lighthouse, and he turns his flashlight on, and he's seeing in the dark, and suddenly the makings of a plan came into Bilbo's. That's what Tolkien wrote. The makings of a plan came into Bilbo's mind.
And then once that inspiration has come to him, then he can use his left brain to try and figure out certain things, like, because he's using it as his servant, not the other way around.
Exactly. So that's then the proper usage of the dragon, the dying brain, facts, figures, and logic to perfection. Bilbo used the left brain to perfection after first he let the lamp light the way. And how did the dwarves respond to Bilbo's plan? Is this, it had to be that way. Go ahead.
Yeah, they didn't like it. They were finding all sorts of flaws in it because, they hadn't walked that journey. They didn't realize how deep in shit they were, basically. How they don't understand the magic of the doors because they're not supposed to be within this fourth ventricle in the third room. But I mean, it says it all right at the beginning, where the companies, when the elves first capture them, that the company's confused, starving, and fatigued. And that's exactly where we are when we're in the dark, confusing, poisoned forest that the enemy creates for us, the clouded heart chakra. We haven't got any food, which is truth spiritually. We haven't got any water, no care and compassion. And we've got no strength left to fight. The dwarves literally could not fight back. They stopped dead and they waited for the authorities to take them. And that stopped dead, I think, is really important, because what does a maritime admiralty law turn us into? A dead thing, a corporation. But not Bilbo, because he was above that. Yeah, man, I think it's quite strange, isn't it, how the elves have become the authorities in this. But when you look at the backstory of where these Greenwood elves came from and what they're surrounded by, it's not surprising that they're in fear, because they're at this point of the story, they're beleaguered by orcs and spiders and the necromancer's sorcery. The numbers have been massively reduced. They've had it really tough, and it's this fear and scarcity, the left brain, that has led to this inhospitality and authoritarian approach that's basically led them to be the police of the forest.
Aaron, that is brilliant, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because here's a part of Tolkien's history that many of you probably do not know at all, and that is not all elves originally found the calling to go to the Undying Lands. There was a group called the Sundered or Sindarin elves that became predominantly known as the Wood Elves, but they missed the boat. I mean, literally, they missed the boat, and as a result, they're known as the Wood Elves because they hid in the protection in the darkness of the forest, because being out in the light in Beleriand was dangerous because that's where Morgoth, Melkor, one of the Valar, had escaped to, and they lived in fear. So the significance of this is, and remember, Thranduil and his kingdom are of this group of elves that never went to the Undying Lands. So they never met God face to face in a place called Pineal. That's the significance of the Noldorin and the other elves that made that passage across to the Undying Lands. They were in presence of God's light. And so this group of elves never made that trip. So they have not seen the promised land. They're still hoping for the promised land, and they've tried to create their own promised land. But that's why it's a fortress. That's why Thranduil's kingdom is a fortress within. And that's brilliant. That's brilliant because to protect yourself, you go within, and that's Thranduil's fortress. But it is still out of fear. And that's precisely what Aaron is saying. So thank you for bringing that point up. These are not the elves that crossed the ocean and saw the Undying Lands. And that's a huge point.
They also lost in the battle of the last alliance of elves and men, the Battle of Daggerlad, just outside the gates of Moria, that you see right at the start of the Fellowship of the Ring. Actually, they lose 2/3 of their people in that battle. Only a third of them come home, and what's a third? It's 33%, isn't it? So it's almost like they've been taken out of that higher mind, and they're back in the fearful states and suspicion.
Which plays itself out perfectly, because then their energy drew the necromancer into Dol Guldur, which is in the dungeons, the basement part of Greenwood the Grey. So they where Thranduil's palace is, this is the head. This is the highest part of Greenwood the Grey. But as they continued to hide and they grew in fear, then they drew the energy of Sauron hiding in the form of the necromancer in the root or Muladhara chakra. Dol Guldur is down in the bottom of Greenwood the Great.
And that's why I think, so no, you go, Eugene.
No, you have to finish your thought.
I think that's why the elves actually capture them, because they only capture them after they've killed the spiders, which represent the real threat, the real evil in Mirkwood. And think about what the police do. If you go out and you take down the real evil and the minions, you're taking the law into your own hands. So the police can't have that, and the Cabal can't have that, because eventually you taking down the real evil leads to them. And when Balin points it out to Thranduil that why have you captured us when we're taking out this evil, these spiders? And Thranduil gets angry because he realizes that, shit, I should have been doing that. That's my task. How have I let my home get to this point? So he doesn't like that because it's showing his own weakness. There's a sense in Mirkwood that a real pessimism because of this. That's what happens when your heart gets clouded by fear and suspicion. There's a pessimism, and it's almost like the elves are thinking, this is just the way it is. What can we really do? And that's not what elven behavior is really about. So when Balin brings it up, Thranduil's not happy.
Brilliant. I mean, wow. Thank you guys. Thank you, Aaron Korn. Wow. That is such genius. Thank you. And then just while you were talking, I just quickly put up the image. So there's a lot going on in this image here because so down, let's take a look from the bottom up. So down below you see Amon Lank, which is the mount of death, the mount of evil, and this is Dol Guldur. So down and to the left, you cannot make this up. This is the opposite of the woodland realm. If you go look on the map here, look at the image on the screen here. The woodland realm, this is where Thranduil's kingdom is. And this is up in the head, and this is up and to the right, very close to Erebor, the lonely mountain. Okay? So this is up and to the right is the Elven king's realm. Okay? And then down and to the left is Dol Guldur, where Sauron in disguise as the necromancer went to hide as he rebuilt his energy and his forces in secret. So there's huge symbology from Tolkien here, down and to the left and up and to the right. Okay. Then take a look at the significance of the Old Forest Road. The Old Forest Road is a great indicator of the heart chakra, is it not? That's kind of like 4 of 7 in the middle way. And essentially how Tolkien describes this is that Thranduil was with his elven force was able to keep things generally peaceful from the Old Forest Road north, but everything below had become sort of hell on earth with Sauron and Sauron's kingdom. Now, just above Dol Guldur, in the face of danger, is Rhosgobel. Rhosgobel is the home of Radagast, which is the wizard who championed God's creatures, animals and insects. And Peter Jackson does an amazing job of showing a much more fleshed out version of Radagast in the movies, which is a real treat, an absolute treat, because it's something that Tolkien really wasn't able to be able to get into in any great detail. But that's Rhosgobel, which is Radagast, the wizard, and you can see that he's put himself in danger's way, but his calling was to protect the wildlife and the animals of Greenwood the Great as it became Mirkwood. Now, if you see Rhosgobel down and to the left here, if you go across to the Great River, which is the Anduin, this is the Anduin River, where it says Log Ningloron, that's the Gladden Fields. And this is where this group of an ancient group of hobbits used to live. And this is where Smeagol, living in his grandmother's hole, grew up. And this is where fishing on the banks of the Anduin, on the edges of the Gladden Fields, this is where Deagle was pulled out of the boat by a great fish, Jonah, Abel, and then Cain, Gollum, strangled Abel. God knows what he did to the body. Did Gollum is known to be a cannibal, so we can only imagine that not only did Smeagol strangle and kill Deagle, but perhaps Smeagol was hungry and he may very well have eaten Deagle as well. So this is Cain and Abel. And so Abel is pulled by a great fish, maybe 153 of them, and he found the One Ring, because this is where Isildur fell when they were surrounded by a host of orcs after the great victory on their way home. And this is where Isildur was killed, and this is where the ring fell into the river, only to be found by Deagle. Abel to be then murdered by Cain, Smeagol, Gollum, Smeagol is Gollum, which is the left brain version of Smeagol. And this is where the One Ring. So there's great significance here, because this is where the ring that Bilbo is using was found. It was found, and it's Sauron's ring. And Sauron was gravitated to Dol Guldur because unwittingly it was close to where his lost precious was. His precious was not very far from him, but he could not see. Sauron could not see. Sauron didn't master the Palantiri. the seeing stones. He only bullied them. Sauron only bullied them. That's why Aragorn wrested control away of the seeing stones, the Palantir, because Aragorn was the rightful king. Sauron's not. Sauron's a fraud. So I just wanted to show you all that. And by the way, where you see the Old Forest Road, there's the ford that crosses the Anduin, and just above it is the Carrick. And that's where the eagles flew the dwarves out of safety when they went from the fire into the frying pan. And so Bjorn's house is just a little up and to the right from the Carrick. And the entrance to the Old Forest Road is here. It doesn't show it on this map. And so this is their path, and this is whatever. And so when you look at this, the long lake, because now see, this is all at this point, what we're looking at is human physiology here. So when Tolkien gets to this point, the what we're looking at is the long lake could be seen as the fourth ventricle of the brain that leads to the third ventricle of the brain, which is Erebor, the lonely mountain. And that's where the dragon is sitting on, on the treasure of treasures. And so you're literally looking at the human head at this point. It's really incredible with Tolkien's creation. It's that genius.
That green part looks like the dark green part looks like a human head too. And then that middle thing could be the brow. And I just want to comment on Anduin because it's so it's Andros, it's God, Andrew, right? And then it's Dan, so it's the man, but really it's DNA. And so it's DNA in you, Anduin. And then of course Andu is unda, so a wave undulates. So that's where the wave is created, isn't it? That's where the story was created in some sense when the ring fell into a hobbit's hand again, right?
Absolutely. And what is Tolkien makes it so clear? What is the life giver of this part of Middle Earth is the Anduin. The Anduin. It is truly the spine of this creation of life known as Middle Earth here.
Which is an anagram for you and I, like the uni and DNA, because the DNA is the one. It's the one unifying information or code. But yeah.
Right, and we did that on the show yesterday again. And these three-letter words always have this triangulation of higher truth within them. So and is Dan of the north, which is the left brain, which is the thinking mind, and DNA is you, which is your right brain, the 90% of you that naturally rises to the single eye, which is what an eye is, all on its own, does it all naturally. So that's why you have, so when you have the triangulation of the word and, it's Dan or DNA. Dan or DNA. So it's Dan and DNA. And you have to choose. The DNA is that ribbon that you see behind Eugene. Just take a look at Eugene right now, and you see that Tiffany blue ribbon coiling as it's rising, and that would be the DNA. And then Dan is your left brain, is the ego of the left brain, which is a viper by the side of the road that comes up from behind unsuspecting weary travelers. When you're not in charge of you, you're a weary traveler. And that's when the ego takes you. When you're weak, when you're low, when you're not focused, living in the now, when your mind wanders, then Dan of the north takes control of you. And that's why it's all perfect. It's all God's creation. And that's why it's Dan and DNA, because it's a choice. It's a choice, Dan or DNA, and/or.
And Charlie, I just, it's interesting how it's the Mirkwood on top of the name is Tor, like Taurus. So there's a.
Yeah, well, just while Eugene's sorting that out, I wanted to talk about barrels and the river, just to follow on what you were saying about the river actually feeding, the body, and that's the main life force. So we're told that wine is one of the main products that floats up this river. Wine is symbolic of it's symbolic of the purified blood. When we become alkaline and we rise to the lonely mountain, we turn water into wine. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that we're told that no vines grow in these parts. So again, like before, we're told that 33% of those elves came back. So it's like they can't rise again. And yeah, they can't grow wine there because, they're in a fearful scarcity mindset. There's authoritarianism. So the elves there can't rise like the vine. They've got to acquire wine from external sources because they're unable, literally, to produce their own. And then I thought it was interesting that the barrels float to Lake Town, which is, to me, it's symbolic of the secretions, the nourishment in our blood. Food and wine float down in these barrels, and they're returned to the heart, which is greenwood, to be sent around the body. So yeah, I think it's all showing that the River Anduin is our circulatory system, and the River Jordan.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Again, Aaron, that's exactly so. I agree with you absolutely 100%. Brilliant. So let me bring this up on the screen here. Should have switched over to me here. Oh well. Okay, so I think everyone can see this, but again, the significance of the gematria. What is the gematria of these letters? So all of these, Dan is 19, N is 19, DNA is 19. Now, why would this collection of letters, which is the story between Cain and Abel, why would it be 19? And what's dark to light? What's the opposite? Okay, so once again, what does 19 symbolize? 19 is symbolized by the need to surrender. And then, as Santos was showing us, exactly. Thank you, Aaron Gorn. Wow. And as Santos was telling us yesterday, it's built in. The answer is built into the number because if you look at 19, 1 plus 9 equals 10, and in gematria we don't count the 0, so it's 1. So you already know who do you surrender to? Surrender is 19. Surrender is embodied by the number 19, the symbology of the numerology of 19, because you surrender to the one, you surrender to God. So 19 is surrender. Now, what is 91? Do the gematria of the word mirror. You think that this is a freaking coincidence again? You want to believe in that Big Bang thing, hey? Mirror is 91. What's the mirror of 19? 91. Now, does anyone want to do in the chat? I can go over and do it, but Phoenix 91? What are all the 91s? Because it's going to blow you away. It's going to blow you away.
And after you do that, Charlie, could I comment on the Mirkwood title just one last time?
Absolutely. I think what I'll just do, I'll put this on share screen so everybody can see it here.
Let me just say quickly as well that a necromancer is someone who predicts the future by communing or raising the dead. And that's exactly what the Cabal do in their maritime system. They predict the future and make bets on our futures depending on our socio-economic status and how much we'll earn, how healthy we'll be. So they are the necromancers. They try to predict the future with the dead.
They truly are. You cannot miss the symbology of that. They are the ones who are obsessed with necro and necrophilia. They are dead. They are death. And that's what Colleen and I shared with you from day one. What we said to you, everything is left brain, right brain. Everything, therefore, is Cain and Abel. This is all biblical. But also day one, what we said to you is that this all plays out DE versus RE. And we are the children of Abel. And we are rightfully establishing ourselves, as Josh X would say, we're rightfully establishing ourselves at the right-hand side of God. RE is Jesus Christ. DE is the devil, and that is death. DE is death. And there are the necromancers, and that's brilliant, Aaron. So let's take a look at the mirror to 19, surrender to God. Look at the mirror. Phoenix 91, mirror 91, Phoenix 91, God wins 91, flat earth 91, POTUS 91, who is Q 91, spirit 91, darkness 91,
Marcus.
liberty 91, buckle up 91, stargate, that's your pineal gland, stargate 91, the Father 91, prison 91, Hercules and his 12 sacred tasks around the wheel. Around the wheel you will go, but you have to master the astrological wheel. 3, 6, and 9, that leads to the 12. That's Hercules' 12 tasks, is to go around successfully. That's why Hercules is connected to all of these symbols that you see on the astrological wheel, because that's his 12, his
labors.
Oh, labors, yeah. The labors of Hercules are the 12. It's the journey around the astrological wheel to Cancer, 69, to find balance and go within.
Radiation.
Wow, yeah.
Cancer cure.
Cancer cure 91. Wow. God wins 91, end of time 91. Palantir, that's
Palantir,
right.
yeah. Wow.
Palantir. So the seeing stones 91. So again, you know, there are no coincidences here, everyone. This is just profound stuff. And this is when you do the work. This is doing the work. When you do the work, then temptation is taken away from you by God, because he loves you. He loves the trier. And then this is that temptation being taken away from you. You're not going to sin. You're not going to fall, because when you start doing the work and you see this miracle of creation, and how everything, what's in a letter, what's in a word, everything, because God is 26. God is 26. The gematria of God is 26, which is A to Z, which is the alphabet. Jesus is the English language, 351. What's 351? Count up the numbers attached to the letters from A to Z, and it's 351. What's 351? It is another variation of 153. So if you can do this, if you can do all of this, I hope you wrote this down, you got this, okay? So up, above, within, above, and soul is DNA, and without, below, and universe is Dan, and is surrender. So who are you going to surrender to? It's your choice. It's your choice. That's why these three words exist together. You're going to surrender to the DNA. What does the DNA do? All on its own, it rises to heaven upon earth. All on its own. All you have to do is get out of your way. All you have to do is get out of your way. Let the shot choose you. Dan gets in the way. Who gets in the way of the DNA? Dan. And you have a choice. And it's DNA and Dan. It's right brain or left brain. It's Abel or Cain. It's blue shift or red shift. It's above, it's below. It's within, it's without. You choose. You choose. You want to live in the out there world. All they give you are talking heads. I'm not making that up. You know that I'm telling you the truth. Every channel you turn on, there's some fucking opinionated asshole, because opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. So opinionated assholes is what they give you on TV. That's Dan. Go DNA. Go DNA. Cheer for the right team. So you can do this with letters. You can do this with numbers. Okay. All right.
My favorite one is NAD, because that gives you nada. And then in 91 was darkness. 91 was also prison. Well, that's where you liberate yourself from the prison, is the darkness. So.
Cast thy net to the right and catch 153 great fish. And you get from A to Z. God encoded every word in the English language, in the alphabet. God encoded everything in the alphabet, 351, A to Z, 153.
And again, this is like what we were saying before about the word Zion and the Star of David and all this kind of things. The number of times that people have said to me, you know, you can't decode stuff in English because it's you babbling on in Babylon. I'm like, no, it's not. It's an original language. It's, you know, what they originally mean is perfect. It can only be twisted by, yeah, it's been twisted and bastardized, but it originally is brilliant. It's truth.
You can't decode if you're speaking legalese. If you're speaking English in the sense of Anklish or Angelish, it's in the words.
Yeah,
That's it.
legalese where nothing means what it actually means.
Exactly. Legalese is what you've been taught in school. That's where you got a C+ or a B or whatever you got. You got a degree in legalese, and that just means red child, wrath, anger over children, red shield, blood red child, Rothschild. That's their world. This is God's language. 9, 9, 9, which is divine. 3 single eyes. Who are the 3 single eyes? They're the 3 wise men. They are pineal gland, pituitary gland, hypothalamus. They are melatonin, serotonin, and dopamine. This is God, this is Mother Mary, and this is Jesus Christ. These are the 3 eyes. This is the 999. So you have 153, you have 351, or you have 513. Let me quickly do, I'll call it up here. Let's do the gematria on 531. So if you guys go ahead and speak.
Legalese brings you to a situation like in the first Harry Potter where Voldemort is, you know, necromancering on that unicorn, right? He is sucking the soul out of the true child of God, which is purity and innocence. And yeah, that's just what that's where legalese takes you. That's where the law of dead, shipments take you, because the children are no longer living in their law. So they're just goods that can be traded on any stock exchange as long as you can steal them. So yeah.
In the UK, if you get into a situation or a crisis, you call 999. But what happens then? You bring in the authorities, who then bring you into the legalese system, and then again they're not sheriffs like in the Shire, they're policy officers. Same in the US, it's 911, isn't it? So you want to be calling the temples and your 9 in the center, but they drag you into their authoritarianism instead of true authority.
Exactly. So that's the art of legalese takes you to legality instead of God's laws. So there's lawfulness under God, and then there's legality, which is the bullshit, where there are rules for us but not for them, because they're lawyers and they create loopholes around their legalese laws. They're shapeshifters. They get out of contracts. They get out of their own complicated system. So let's take a look here. So, and I was saying we can do this with words. We can do this with numbers. So again, 153, 351, or 513. What's the gematria of? Oh shoot, I did 531. Oh, and there's so many. I'll just quickly fix this. There were so many incredible ones.
But yeah, I'll just comment on the Mirkwood thing right now, so you don't have to bring it up later. Backwards on the top title, it was Soul Dead, SOLEDEAD. So it seems like when you are in Mirkwood and you don't come upon that straight and narrow path, your soul is dead. And in the front, it was tar end. So the ending of the Taurus field. So it's just very interesting.
Okay, so thank you for that, Eugene. And so then 513 is, behold, I lay a Zion, a stumbling stone, and a rock of offense. Yes, the number 18 is in fact the number of Christ. 666, that of a beast or that of a man, your choice. And of course, 18 is chi, which is the energy of life, and 1 and 8 is 9. His children first, then his career, then nothing, then me. I love that. Vote for Trump. What the hell do you have to lose? You had nothing left to lose. If she had won, you would have quickly found out you had nothing left to lose except your soul. That was all that was left, hanging by a thread. The truth is revealed and the end of all wars has been achieved. 513. The coronation ceremony of the appointed new queen. Yeah, the real queen, which is the milk to the honey, the pineal gland to the pituitary gland to the pineal gland, the milk to the honey. The journey of life hasn't always been easy for you. Look what they do to you. Look what they do to me. Integrity, knowledge. Wow. Wow. Integrity, knowledge, courage to serve and protect. 513. All the occultists are serpents and therefore Satan. Wow. Jesus has been helping Satan escape karma. That's right. So he can be brought to justice. Light as a feather, my soul is ascending. Seek true word. 513. So Jesus told us that we would not believe who he is. The couple that prays together stays together. 513.
I will kill every single tyrant until I can get peace.
Yeah.
That goes for the ones within.
Yeah. Death of poverty, consciousness universally. Sangre por sangre, you disgusting so-called Shekinah. Wow. Wow. Blood for blood. Wow.
But pituitary secreting too much growth hormone, that's actually the opposite. We're all short because the pituitary is off. That's why Mary grows when he takes the tree, whatever fluid thing, because that's the pineal and the pituitary waking up.
Right. Well, no, but that's the point of 513 is when you achieve 513, the pituitary is secreting too much growth hormone because it's the river of the mother, which is the pituitary, which is overflowing, the cup of Christ, which is the Y. So this is an allegory for the cup of Christ overflowing.
Wow, Charlie, if we are all gods, then why do people need to be religious? Amen.
And religion means religare, means to tie back or to bind back. But if it's already all God, why do we need to be bound back? Because it already is God.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Which George Burns was speaking to again in Oh God again last night, and so many of the little That's the thing. If you just go back to that movie and you create like a clip, it's the same thing with Bruce Almighty and Evan Almighty with Morgan Freeman, Jimi Hendrix, that if you just collect all those scenes, then if you collect all those scenes together, then you just see this pure truth of God. It's the same thing with George Burns. Every time he speaks in "Oh God," and what you were just saying, he addresses in so many different ways in "Oh God." It really does. And the serpents are no longer arrogant after they are dead. Wow. So again, this symbology can be encoded with numbers or letters. And so what you're looking at here is God's language. This is how God speaks to us. We were not taught this. We were not taught this. And this is essentially, you know, the beginning of what Santos was teaching. I think it was extended further by Colleen and I. And then this is the beauty of Michael Brian Protzman, -48, coming along, and then he tied it all together into, and essentially through gematria, tied all of this together. Like I said, our third podcast after we did our original 7 shows on Everything You Know Is a Lie, Now Would You Like to Hear Some Truth? We did those 7 parts. So the first 7 that we did is that Everything You Know Is a Lie, Now Would You Like to Hear Some Truth? The third podcast that we did after that was God's sacred numerology and symbology. And it was an entire show on how the sigils of the alphabet is your coding system. And this is how God speaks to you. And that's why everything's coded to you. That's why you see certain numbers. That's why certain words pop up. And then as you get into gematria, it shows you why and shows you who you're connected to. And you just sit back and you go, wow, wow. It's like I did not choose Charlie Freak because Charlie's 56 and Freak is 41, and that's Light King. I didn't choose Charlie Freak for that reason. I chose Charlie Freak for what it stood for, which is that the song is not about some druggie having an overdose. It's about God humbling himself to give us an opportunity. The song is not about Charlie Freak. God is the Light King. Charlie Freak is Light King. God, Steely Dan knows this. Donald Walter knows this. And God is Charlie Freak. It's the narrator of the song who bought his prize for chicken feed. So much for friendship. He saw his friend, he looked like he was suffering, looked like he had a drug addiction. He fed his addiction with more money so that he could overdose. And then he bought his, and me so wise, what did Donald Walter sing? Me so wise, I bought his prize for chicken feed. But yes, Jack, I gave it back. The ring I could not own. Now, come, my friend, I'll take your hand and lead you home. Wow. That's why I chose Charlie Freak, because that's what this is all about. You're looking at this the wrong way. Got everything backwards. You're looking at everything upside down. The song is not about some victimized drug abuser. It's God giving us an opportunity. So go back to Evan Almighty. Evan's talking to, God is talking to Evan's wife at the restaurant, and she's saying, my husband is New York's Noah. New York's Noah, and he said God speak to him. What am I supposed to do with that? How does Morgan Freeman respond? He says, well, I see it as an opportunity. Let me ask you something. If you ask God to bring your family closer together, do you think that he just magically waves his wand and makes your family closer together? Or does he create an opportunity for you and your family to come closer together? And then the wife goes, because that's what at the beginning of the movie she did. She prayed to God that he would help bring their family closer together. When you pray to God and you ask for your family to become closer together, do you think God waves a magic wand and makes your family closer together? Or does he give you an opportunity for you to make your family closer together? You know, and what does God say? God says, I love that story. You know, that story is incredibly misunderstood. People think it's about God's wrath and anger. People love that stuff. He said, oh, and she goes, it's not? What is it? He goes, I see it as a love story. Because he said, did you know why there were two? Because they were all side by side. They all entered the ark, including Noah's family, side by side. And that's a family coming closer together. So you build an ark, Noah. Well, what's an ark? One act of random kindness, and it changes the world one act at a time. And that's a tough act to follow. Jesus Christ. Who is the original ark builder? Jesus Christ. Q's plan is Noah's ark. Watch the water.
Plus, that's why I think Bjorn took two dwarves at a time, because it's a Gemini reference of the twins. We're coming in two at a time, and then the of course Argo and Cancer is the ship that they're riding, or the ark, or that's why Cancer is at the top of the Freemason ark, so and so.
That's fantastic, and of course it was Gandalf's plan at two at a time, 22. How you win over Bjorn, who's gone too far to the left, you win him back over two at a time.
And Bjorn's house had no windows in the sides, just one smoke hole at the top, just like the ark.
Wow, that's exactly right. There was only one window which was pointing up to heaven.
Wow, and one fat one in the end, right?
Good old Bomber.
Yeah, I think I'm that one. Could I share barrels with you guys? What I think on barrels? Well, again, so just to clarify, the Mirkwood, the back 8 letters was soul dead. Because again, the soul is dead when you're in Mirkwood, when you're in your thought, when you can't get through and you keep going into the spiders and you're not on the straight and narrow path that God, Gandalf, tells you to stay on, and you stray away, you get distracted, then of course, your soul is dead. Anyway, so barrel to me is B, Ra, and L. But in this case, it was a barring of L, because L was imprisoned. And that's an allegory also for our body too. Like if we are ejaculatory, then we're basically setting up our own prison. Icarus, go ahead, Charlie. What were you going to say on that?
No, you keep going. We'll talk about this after, but that's what you're encoding here. Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Exactly. And so the bar really is your spine. So, and that's where you raise the electricity. That's the cathedral. Is the light kind of crappy? Anyway, so it's the rib. We were talking about DNA earlier. That's the deoxynucleic ribosome, however you say it. I don't really know. But it's the rabbi. And the rabbi is the one who give you the Saturnian law. Isn't that so interesting? And of course, the wine, they were talking about all this elves having wine. Of course, Libra, rest, crown. So it's all about, yeah, exactly, water to wine. It's all about Saturnian law and rising above it, saying that I'm not dead. Lord of the Rings, the whole Saturn thing, I'm not the duality where it's acidity. I'm on top. I have my crown. And of course, barrel really comes to cask or vessel, because it's like a blood vessel, right? It keeps the fluid within. So really, it's the same thing as the stream. So it's funny how they were, kind of battling with their barrel, their own vessel, as they were going up the stream or down the stream, whichever way you want to look at it. And then was it Bilbo that was kind of struggling? He was wrestling with an angel almost, right? And he was trying to get on top. He was under the Maritime Admiralty Law, and then he comes back up over the Maritime Admiralty Law. So really, again, it's the barrel is about a vessel. So really the vessel is about Saturnian law and saying I'm afloat, which means I'm flowing. I'm on top of the water, not under it. And I think that all comes back to barrel, bar, L, or B, Ra, and L. Yeah.
It's 100%. It's the last part of the show today, and all of you are gonna love this, because now we're gonna close the show today with all of this maritime realty law stuff, and Eugene just knocked it out of the ballpark with that. So as we get into this, and I want you guys to speak mostly through this, but as we get into this, who's the only one that doesn't get into a barrel? It's Bilbo. And what's the condition of the dwarves? For most of the dwarves at the end of the journey, they became all sort of waterlogged. Hold on, guys. That's enough. They became waterlogged on their journey in their barrels. But Bilbo couldn't get into the barrel because again, he couldn't be in the dungeon, just because he couldn't be in the bag of the trolls. Bilbo wouldn't fit into any construct of the cabal, because Bilbo Baggins is 99, which is most high. So Bilbo was wrestling with his ability to stay afloat. And that's walking on the water. So Bilbo Baggins, who at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings is 111 years old, and Frodo is 33, and together they made 144, and Bilbo invited 144 special guests to his special dinner banquet in the inner field of the party tree. I mean, it's just wow. It's just wow. God loves a trier. Jesus is trying to become Christ-like. He was desperately trying to stay afloat, which is above the maritime admiralty law waters, and therefore walking on the water. So with that, I'll throw it back to you guys, but let's just take everybody down the journey of the river to the huts of the raft elves. And I mean, this is stunning stuff that Tolkien created. And all the symbology of what is happening, and who was in the barrels and who wasn't in the barrels, and even why Bilbo got a cold, which we can get into as well. But if you guys want to jump in with that.
Yeah, exactly what you guys have just said. But also, a bar is a unit of pressure or weight. So an L is the child. So it's almost like the dwarves in there represent the child under pressure. So they're being forced to change. Whereas Bilbo is above all that. He's riding on top of the Maritime Admiralty Law, which is also invisible to the Maritime Admiralty Law as well, by the way. While he's got the ring on, they can't see him because he doesn't exist in that matrix, in that system. But yeah, the Thorin, especially being, Christ, he's under the bar, the pressure of that weight that he needs to change, and that's how the diamond is formed, isn't it? Through pressure and through friction, and that's how we transform.
So true.
Yeah, I've kind of said what I had to say.
Okay, yeah, and did you want to put your whiteboard back up, or did you erase it?
I erased. I'm so sorry. Which part did you want me to?
It's okay. I don't want you to have to recreate it, but there was so much to look at there. It was really great. So again, it is downstream. They are going downstream, and again, the symbology being is that after entering into this kingdom of heaven, which is the Elven kings, and we saw that Tolkien drew it himself. So this is, going into that 1, 2, 3rd level, 3rd room, and then there's a door to the right, which is the pineal gland. Then now they're being transported to this last place. This is the idiosyncrasy and the great detail of the Christ story now. And it really is. So this is all going to be about the death and resurrection and the rising and the stone, the fornix rolling back, and then rising to God at the right hand side of heaven. I mean, so symbolically, what we're looking at now literally is as much about the map and about the shape of Tolkien's creation here as anything else. because we're now looking at this upward journey. And if we go back to the map, I think I have it still up here. So once again, if you get back to this, what we looked at is in the woodland realm, Bilbo was free as he entered into the mine, but the dwarves went into the mine as prisoners. So the dwarves are prisoners of their minds. You cannot miss the allegory that is being done here. Bilbo was not a prisoner of the mine. Bilbo had a magic ring that allowed him to be exempt from being a prisoner of the mind. So then that means that Bilbo is not ruled by the Maritime Admiralty Law of Waters, which is why it's Bilbo who created a plan on the back of the Cabal. So the Cabal, because of their love of wine, they've created an industry, a busyness with a trap door. And Bilbo uses their trap door to escape. It's really brilliant. And then Bilbo uses the natural flow of the waters, the river in the center path, to be able to flow naturally to freedom. So then that's escaping through the mother, so they can go on this journey to the father. So if you look on the map here, this is where they escape, which is to the right. Then they got to the long lake. You could see the long lake literally as like the fourth ventricle of the brain that leads to Erebor, which is the third ventricle of the brain. And then this is where everything happens. And that's why the Arkenstone is here, because the Arkenstone is the pineal gland that has to be illuminated. And the only way you can do that is to eliminate the dragon. And there's a dragon in Erebor, but there's an Arkenstone in Erebor. And it is just above on a straight and narrow way from the long lake. So this could easily be seen as casting thy net to the right, casting thy net to the right by entering within the woodland realm, the elven king, the 11 king, the king of 11, and entering within and casting thy net to the right to enter into the fourth ventricle is the only way. Remember, as I told you physiologically, and I've showed you on so many shows now, the only way to get into the third ventricle is through the fourth ventricle. And the only way to get to the fourth ventricle is through the hypoglossal opening of the brainstem, which is casting thy net to the right out of the body, which is the crucifixion, the crossing the fiction out of the matter where everything matters into the antimatter, which is nothing matters in the head. You're just one with God. And then, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, Charlie, and where does the wine that allows this all to happen, that the guard and the butler drink, where does that come from?
And this comes from the spine, the base of the spine. So you see the river that connects to the long lake was the Caledwine. The Caledwine River that connects, it leads all the way to the vineyards to the south. So it just
Darwinian.
Yeah.
Darwin Ion, and Darwinian translates as young land country. So this is the wine that's put the authoritarians to sleep. It's the secretions of the pituitary and the pineal, which is young land country, the eternal life, fountain of youth. And it's the door that wins the eye on.
And it totally is, because remember, what's melatonin? Melatonin only comes through the pineal gland, right? And melatonin, one of the first things that melatonin does is allows you to sleep like a baby at nighttime. So then you have all of these circadian rhythms, because you have to be in this duality, you have to be able to rest. So this is the balance that we all need and we're lacking, because nobody is producing melatonin, which is the honey. which is a preservative, long life within. So that's right. So this is Dorwinian. So you win the single eye on by going through the door. Dorwinion. You win the single eye on by going through the door. The door is the pineal gland, which is the raising of the water to make wine. Okay, where do you make wine? In the woodland realm. and then this is the spine. So and by the way, and this is also, so Kelly, Cele, both in Latin, but also in Tolkien's Elvish, both mean light. So this is, and that's what wine is. Turning water into wine is taking dead water and turning it into living water. It's alkalizing the water, which is purifying it with ultraviolet light, UV, U21, V22, 43, UV light, and it's the purification. That's how you turn dead water into living water, and that's turning water into wine upon the long lake that leads to Erebor. And Erebor is your highest mind. And this is where there's a dragon, but there's also the Arkenstone. And you have to slay the dragon to illuminate the Arkenstone, and then the river will flow with gold to the long lake, which is what was foretold. That's the prophecy of the return of the king. So you see, in the Hobbit, there was a return of the king, and that was written in the prophecy of Thor's grandson, Thorin Oakenshield, who would return and have the rivers flowing with gold again. That's right, because Thorin Oakenshield had to go within. But he needed a lot of help, and he got help from his friends. Bilbo Baggins is a friend. Bilbo Baggins is 99 most high. He's a friend to all those who subscribe to the light. So that's brilliant, Aaron Gorn. That's right. The Celadwine, which is the light spine, that's the light rising within you, the sacred Christic fluids, right? So the Celadwine would be the CSF rising in your spine from Dorwinian to the long lake to Erebor, to slay the dragon. It's all there. It's absolutely all there. It's really, really incredible stuff. And so once again, I think all of you have seen this so many times now. Bilbo Baggins did not get bagged by the trolls. Bilbo Baggins did not get eaten by the orcs. Bilbo Baggins did not even get rounded up by the dwarves per se. Bilbo Baggins was free, separated, so that he could find the ring, the one ring. And then Bilbo Baggins showed mercy to not kill Gollum by therefore saving all of mankind in the future by showing care and compassion for such a wretched creature. Even the lowest amongst us, Bilbo showed compassion for and did not stab that vile creature. I wish that Bilbo had stabbed that vile creature, Gandalf. Do not be so quick, Frodo, to deal out death and judgment, for not even the wise can foresee all ends. I feel that Gollum has a role to play in all of this before all is said and done. The ring was meant to come to Bilbo, which means the ring was meant to come to you. And that is highly encouraging thought, because it comes from God. So that's what we're seeing throughout this story, is that Bilbo was not spun into a funnel web by the spiders. Bilbo, they started to, but they couldn't finish it because Bilbo had a sting to go with his ring. Bilbo had a ring and a sting. And so he slayed the spiders to give his dwarvish friends freedom, but the dwarves stumbled right into their next enemy, which are the elves, and they were bagged up yet again and made prisoner. But Bilbo once again escaped the bag, escaped the cuffs, and went freely into the woodland realm. And therefore he freely escaped via the river, which is the mother, to get to the long lake, Esgaroth. And if it's not for Bilbo and the courage of Bilbo to go down and speak to Smaug, then Smaug would never have egotistically shown him his great impenetrable armor, of which Bilbo noticed that there was a hole in his armor. There was a link missing in the chain. And it was Bilbo who told the dwarves, who was overheard by the thrush, who then flew and told Bard the bowman that there was a hole in the armor of his breastplate up and to the right, and to look for the hole in the armor up and to the right of Smaug. So it's Bilbo. It's Bilbo. Bilbo spoke to the dragon and learned what he needed to learn. And then Bilbo saw himself losing his matchup with the dragon because he gave away the fact that he was a barrel rider. And as such, he said that those tubmen from Esgaroth have been helping you, barrel rider. It's high time I paid them a visit. But again, that's the dragon being ruled by the ego, taking off to his death, because there was Sagittarius. There was the keen bow with the true aim, and it laid to waste the desolation, the abomination of the desolation. And that's what God is speaking to, and that's what the book of Revelation is speaking to you about. The abomination of the desolation is that you've allowed a dragon into heaven upon earth. God exists within your higher mind. God exists in the mercy seat right behind your third ventricle. And instead of you there, you have a dragon sitting on all of God's treasures in your Erebor, in your lonely mountain. And that's the abomination of the desolation. And that's why that beautiful area from Long Lake to Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, Tolkien calls it the desolation of Smaug. And that's the abomination of the desolation. That Thror became ruled by his love for gold, and he's now allowed a dragon. So you see, in many respects, Thror didn't die. It's still Thror, but he's now transmutated himself into an ugly dragon. And the grandchild, grand is God, and the grandchild, Thorin, is the one who must take down the dragon of Thror and return the king to the mountain and retrieve the Arkan stone, the stone in the ark, which is the pineal gland. It's brilliant stuff. So we'll wrap it up for today, and I'll just pass it over to you guys for your comments to that and final thoughts for everything.
Up to you, brother, if you want to go first.
Sure, mine's short. So it seems like when you're not floating down the stream or floating up the stream, you're stuck in your dungeon, and it means you're not raising L, and yeah, you're in thought or you're ejaculating or both, because they're the same thing. Anyway, so when you are floating down the stream, I think something along the lines of we were going into the sun, and at the same time we were going to the land that is home, or something, returning to the homeland. So there we go. And that's it.
Yeah, so true. I just wanted to say, I guess something struck out at me when it said that Bilbo felt like a burglar that has to steal from the same house day after day. And I think that's how we feel when we wake up to the system, to the matrix, and we can see through it, but we still feel stuck in it. There's no way out. We feel like the prisoners, like the dwarves are literally, and Bilbo is figuratively, because he can't really escape either. We've not yet achieved that liberation that comes from true enlightenment, where we see that every experience, including the negative aspects of the matrix, are all designed for our liberation. They're all the keys in our mind forged manacles, whether they're positive or negative. So when we see that the matrix, even when it's frustrating us, when we see that it has a purpose, we actually rise above it, and we realize that it's there to test us. So we no longer be as frustrated by that matrix. It doesn't feel like a prison anymore. It reminded me of the Matrix films when they're woken up and they realize that they can come out of the matrix into reality. They only go back into the matrix when there's a mission to fulfill. So that can be our own experience with the system. Like I've had to have dealings with it recently, and it frustrates me because Sagittarius rising, I don't want any of that crap. I want to be free. I want to run, but there's still a necessity to a certain extent. But it's that seeing through it and seeing why Babylon, like Josh said last night, it's be able on. It's our ability to be able even within Babylon. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, guys.
Brilliant stuff, brilliant stuff. And so what Aaron said is that, and Eugene has been saying it, we're prisoners of the mind. We absolutely are. And that's what Bilbo was feeling, trapped, because Bilbo was choosing to help the fallen. He wasn't there of his own behest. He was there to help. And he felt trapped, just like the dwarves are trapped. And Bilbo felt trapped. He wasn't trapped. Bilbo could have left, but he felt trapped because he felt he needed to stay and help others who are truly prisoners of the mind, and the dwarves were prisoners. So what is the soul euion? What is the eucatastrophe from the Son of Man in the physical to turn the ion? Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo Baggins is always the answer. Why? Because Bilbo Baggins is 99, which is most high. God is most high. Bilbo Baggins is 99. But Tolkien creates the name with two B's. There's no mistake. I mean, anyone alchemically knows that when you use, two names that start with the B, first and second name, or first and last name, that's 22. And father, mother, child. What's gematria of 77? Christ. Mother, father, father, mother, child. Bilbo Baggins, 99. What is the solution to all things? Father, mother, child. It's the Trinity. Trinity. And that's why in the fourth and final installment of The Matrix, they don't finally win until she is victorious. And that's U V W. Do you see that? Let me do this one more time. We'll close the show with this, okay? Think of the miracle of the English language and how everything is a message to you, encoded to you about the miracle. So why is it in the last Matrix, Trinity is the one that had to lead things? Neo says, is that you flying? Because I'm not doing this. Neo tried to fly and he couldn't fly. And so Trinity saved the day. Why? because the eucatastrophe is when the sacred feminine, which is symbolized by the vaginal portal to God, is in unison with God, which is the W, which is the womb. So you have the eucatastrophe, which gives you victory, and you've won. UVW, 21, 22, and 23. And what's the mean? What's the mean of 21, 22, and 23? 22. And 3 22s is 66. 66 is the number and the journey of man. 66 is 12, and it's all about completion. And the answer is right here, because 1 plus 2 . And it's all about the 3, the 6, and the 9. And that's the triangle. There you go. Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla encoded in the alphabet. A to Z, count them up, 351. 351, 153, 351, 513. It's encoded, letters, numbers. This Trinity is in all things. And the reason is because you have a choice. You have a choice between the duality and the singularity. And the 3 is 1. That's what God taught me, is that 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. And that's God's math. That may not be what they taught you in school, but I assure you that's God's math, because 3 is 1. And that's the symbology of 13 and 31. 13 and 31. Do the gematria on both of those, and it'll blow you away. Because 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 1, not 3. So 3 is 1, and 1 is 3. And the 3 Musketeers famously said, all for one and one for all. And there were 3 of them until D'Artagnan came. So with that, thank you very, very much. Everything's happening, folks. Just people ask me, and maybe the boys want to speak to this as well quickly, but people ask me, they feel a bit down after what happened to the truckers in Ottawa. These are actors, and they've got other roles to play. And so they're, if Jim Morrison is going to be unveiled eventually to us, then Rush Limbaugh had to die. And therefore, if we want this great unfolding and this reveal to occur, then even these little moments in time, like what happened so beautifully in Ottawa, they must come to an end. But it's only leading to something better, something more. And we're in the winter. And so remember, my original guess as to when all of this would play out was my original guess was always going to be spring, because it's mankind springing back to life, and that's Passover. So what I said back in 2020 is that my guess was that the great reveal would be at Passover, which you could look at as March 21st, 22nd, 23rd of 2021. And what I didn't know at the time was January 6th hadn't come yet. And on January 6th, you had this takedown of Trump's 4-year presidency, and then the 1-year Delta, the pound of flesh. And we're watching this movie. And so that's what I didn't know at the time, is that it wouldn't be spring of 2021. It would be bringing back to life Aries arising in 2022. So that would be, and you know, we're just seeing everything push towards this, everything being massively pushed towards. So I would say enough has happened for something major to happen at the Passover. And we're only we're only 3 weeks away. We're only 3 weeks away from essentially, you know, a month, 3 weeks away from the Passover. So it's a countdown. It's a countdown, and I really believe that. So you know, if it's just going to be a random event by them in the end, then it'll go when it needs to go. But if it's a symbolic date, then there's nothing more symbolic than Passover 2022. There's nothing more symbolic. And that's what I said at Passover of 2021. So did you guys want to comment on that at all, or?
Can't wait for Passover myself. So no, exactly everything you just said. Nothing more to add.
I'm just seeing in the chat that Trudeau's revoked the Emergencies Act, which shows that, you know, tyranny can be brought down. And that's all I have to say, really.
Yeah, and remember what the Canadians did, because the White Hats tipped what they were going to do with the Emergency Act and Trudeau being able to seize bank accounts. Canadians brought the chartered banks in Canada to their knees by taking out their money from the banks in droves, money that the banks didn't have. And the stuff that people had to endure last week of the excuses about not being able to get their money out. Just ask Colleen here in Mexico, trying to get any of our funds out of the bank, and they simply deny all the time. They simply deny the access to these funds because they don't have them, because it's all fake. It's all fake and it's all fraud. But don't panic, and don't. You got nothing to worry about. What's coming, they know what you had in there. And if there's a dollar for dollar replacement, whatever. But what's coming is so much bigger than that. It's not about dollars and cents at all. It's about common sense, not dollars and cents. It's common sense that's coming. And that is abundance. And so abundance is coming your way. You got nothing to worry about. So yeah, thank you for being here today. Amazing show. Miss Sandra so much. She said to Colleen that she was going to be late today. So I hope so much Sandra will be with us here again next week. And Eugene, whenever, you know, give me a little bit of time, but whenever you want to plan to do an amazing separate show like we did the other day, but with Aragorn and Sandra, you know, you go right ahead. That'll be so much fun. So love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And we appreciate all your love and support. And we will see you Friday night. And Friday night is a great show. And this is the truth. Truth is life. Believing in lies is death. Lies close passageways and doorways within you, junk DNA, and you will die. If you lie, you're going to die. And that's why they rhyme. And God is the God of the living. And if you tell the truth, which is God's truth, you will certainly live. And so it's going to be an amazing show. We got amazing songs and videos coming up to support it. And it's going to be great. And that's Friday night, 107.1 FM on your FM dial. And I'll see you then. I'm your host, the Nightfly, Charlie Freed. And with that, Aragorn, I love you, buddy. Thank you so much. Genio, I love you so much. Sandra, we love you so much. Colleen, Shanady, and Dante, we love you so much. And everyone in the chat room, we love you so much.